Hello and welcome to the 27th episode of Dystopedia. I'm your host, Matt Davison, and once again joined by my colleague, Andrew Hodgson.
How are you, Matt?
Yeah, I'm pretty well, Andrew. How are you going today?
I'm pretty good.
What have you been up to this week, mate? Anything fun, exciting?
To be honest, I feel like all week I've been pedaling like mad to get research in for today's episode. You know, I'd have to read a whole book in a week, which I don't think I've ever done in my life. I don't think I've ever done it that quick, so I can't really think of much else that I've done besides that, to be honest with you.
It's been your sole focus, has it?
It really has. What about you?
Yeah, well, I decided to read Fatherland like 3-4 weeks ago and like space it out because I'm a slow reader, so I decided
I should have done it. Just one track mind. I can't.
Yeah, because I really was really keen to go back into this one because it's such an exciting book. But no, what I've been doing, I've decided to read Brave New World actually. So I picked it up. Yeah, decided to give it another crack again.
Yeah,
because after I finished this book and I was just contemplating what to read, and when we did Demolition Man and a couple of other utopias, dystopias disguised as utopias, I thought, I better give Brave New World a go.
The original, yeah.
The original, so.
Isn't that funny though? Like, again, you take your hat off to Demolition Man for making you feel
like
out of all
movies to do that.
Really weird.
It's bizarre. But I think the thing, I'm actually enjoying it a lot more this time around than the first time I tried to attempt it. I think I was in a different headspace when I was reading it, and I was assuming it was like 1984 when it's actually something completely different. I mean, still the language and some of the terminology is a bit, I'm having to look things up a couple of times and here and there, and I get a bit lost in the story, like, hey, where's it going? But then it gets you back on track. But no, I like the subtlety to it and the little things about how just, don't worry about it. Just take a Somna pill.
Soma.
Take Soma. Don't worry about it. Yeah, then the different classes and the breeding of people and stuff. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I'm with you. Actually, I feel I may actually start reading that again as well. I feel like I wasn't in a good place to read it. I was thinking, because you always hear of 1984 and that as the two. You know, I think you mentioned before the fork in the road.
Exactly.
As well as Dystopia. And I really found Brave New World. I found it a bit of a slog to get through, but I think because, as you say, it was like I was getting lost in a lot of, like, I guess it talks about a lot of biology and social engineering, and then I guess it was written in early 30s, I think.
Like 32, 33.
32, yeah. And then some of the language used at that time, and then all the scientific stuff, I just couldn't, like, I was getting like lost in it. I was and then every 2 minutes I'm having to stop and read. And
from what I've read so far, there's a couple of times where he transitions in a weird way where, like, you're thinking you're talking to this, you're in one scene, the next thing you know, you're in another area and location with different characters, and you're like, oh wait, I thought I was talking to this character, but then it jumps to somewhere else, randomly. You're like, oh, okay, yeah.
It's very, like, highbrow.
Oh, very highbrow, yeah.
But I think probably now in doing this podcast, where we are and where your brain is, and you're always looking for allegory and deep in research, it would probably sink in a lot better now. I say,
absolutely, yeah. No, and it's intriguing too, because I finally understand, like, why people always reference it and want. Like, I'm only halfway through it, but I want to keep knowing more about the society and the world and where it's going, and why the main character's trying to break out of that cycle that everyone's in, and questioning it. Where, and it's an interesting take, because when we think of dystopia, like, you always think of it, in the 1984 mold, where this one's in a very different one, where it's just like, oh no, don't worry about it. Just turn a blind eye to it. Just take some drugs. Make you forget about the problems of the world or your place in the world. Yeah. So it's a great read so far. Yeah.
As we've said, it's the one that's closest to our time, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can see why it's like its fingerprints are through all different types of literature and media as well. So yeah, I'll probably definitely do that in an episode down the track, and go into it. I'm looking forward to completing the book.
I mean, I reckon a good idea for an episode, and comment if you think this is the case, but I reckon even one talking about, like, critiquing 1984 and Brave New World, and then comparison to our world, and see which one.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting idea, actually. Yeah. Like the battle of the books or something like that.
Yeah, which one's closer to our time, and some parallels and stuff like that. I mean, that'll be a lot of work. We haven't even done 1984 yet. To be honest, I'm a bit scared to do that. But
it's overwhelming.
Before I even think of Brave New World, but
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. On that note, so last week we left Omelas and ended up at the Delicatessen. And while at the Delicatessen, we somehow ended up in the Twilight Zone and came across our favourite food critic.
Bartlett Finchley.
Bartlett Finchley, exactly. And then when we decided to exit the Twilight Zone, we ended up in an alternative history where the Nazis were in control, and now is referred to as the Fatherland. So we're in now Fatherland time. I don't know how that works, but it somehow does.
I don't know where you pulled that one from. How long are you going to keep these segues going for?
I know, I'm getting worried now. It's getting too long. Drawing that long, but I think this might be the last one, actually.
I mean, that one just works.
Yeah. I think Twilight Zone, you can kind of like you can twist and turn it a bit.
Oh, it's a Twilight Zone. It's a lovely plot device.
It is. It's great, isn't it?
Don't have to question it.
Yeah. Yeah, but obviously, as you probably see from this title, but this week we're doing the 1992 book Fatherland by Robert Harris. And when was the first time you ever read this book?
I actually read it about 10 years ago now. Funny story, actually. This reminds me, so when I first learnt about this, I was actually in Vietnam. So I moved to England 11, 12 years ago, and I was there for quite a bit. And before I came home, I spent a month in Vietnam, and I was just sort of biking around the country. And I was in a place called Phu Quoc Island. So it's in the Gulf of Thailand.
Mm.
So you have to take a boat across. And it was one of these places where, like, when I was there, all the hotels were building, but they hadn't been built yet. So it still was what it was.
Mm.
Yeah, and, you would just sit on the side of the road and, have a bit of, I don't know, you'd have some pippies or something with a beer and watch the world go by, and you wouldn't pay much. It was just very, very genuine. But I remember sitting in a street bar there, and when you look at Asia and they just got those bars on the street, and just sitting there having a couple of beers before the sun was going down. I was just by myself, and on the TV was the movie. I know it was a movie, and I'm sort of sitting there watching it. I was watching the start of the film, like when they're on the, in the book how they describe when they're on the bus and the tour guide's giving them.
You ran Berlin.
It was that scene, and I was like looking at it thinking, oh, this looks intriguing. Like, and it had like the swastikas.
Does that you think swastikas?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, what's this? And then I think I'd got back to my hotel room. I had a night out, and then I remember like just googling like mad. I was trying to find like Nazi movie or movie alternate history movie, and I think after a while I got onto it, and then I thought, oh, it's a book, and then I think as soon as I arrived home, I bought the book and I was just blown away by it. And it's funny, but I distinctly remember sitting in that bar in Thailand, in Vietnam, just looking at it, thinking that looks very intriguing,
Oh yeah, you would, because even though the movie's a bit, probably trash, we'll go into it later, but
it's not great.
It's not great, yeah. But when you see some of the cinematography and the costumes and the decor and things, it's very well done, right? In that regard. So
it was a setting that drew me.
Yeah, and would draw you. It looks like it's intriguing in that way, isn't it?
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, well, once again from you. No, because I think it was when we were working the same job, and it was about 2018, I think 2019, around then. And it was when Man in the High Castle was on Amazon, and I was watching that intently and saying how great it was. Then you were saying to me, oh, it reminds me a bit of the book I've read a couple of years ago called Fatherland. I'm like, oh, what's that? It's similar kind of vein, but in this world, it's more focusing on just Nazi Germany as opposed to if Nazis in Japan took over America. I'm like, oh, okay, that sounds really interesting. I remember you gave me the book, and it's the edition that you've got is this big red one, and it's a massive.
This one right here.
Yeah, the one in your hand right now for our listeners. But the ASMR. Oh, actually, I might put a photo of what this one looks like, because when I used to go out and I'd like to read out in at a cafe or something, or just you grab
very
coffee.
Cosmopolitan,
very very gentrified of me to do this. Very very cultured. Yeah. Something nice about like getting coffee and reading a book, and it's a nice feeling. Yeah. And because this book's got like a massive like eagle and swastika on it, so I always feel a bit like self-conscious trying to read it in public. I'm like, oh, people think I'm reading Mein Kampf or something. Trying to get eugenics or something started in Australia or something. Mate,
that was 10 years ago. Imagine now.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm happy to say that one I bought recently off Amazon itself is a bit more subtle to it, so you can go out in public and with it without people knowing what it is. But no, but I remember reading it and being it was very like a great. I found it a very good blend of detective / alternate history mixing together, and one complementing the other, as opposed to like one being the backdrop to the other or something. So no, I was very intrigued by it, and it always stuck with me. But it's funny, as time goes on, you kind of forget little bits and pieces here and there. But was reading it again and being like, oh, that's right, I remember this happening, and it's so well done in a way where you think it's going down one path, then it'll just throw a spanner in the works and then catch you off guard, and then you're like, oh, it's going this direction now, and oh, I didn't think of it from this point of view, and it was just it's always stuck with me, this book, and that's why I'm really glad to do this episode and go into it.
And there's a pressure on to do this justice. I mean, I feel like I've really crammed this week for this one. So I don't know how good I'm going to be, but we'll give it a crack. But
exactly. But I think before we get into Fatherland itself, we should go into the author himself. So that's Robert Harris, and he was originally a journalist, then became an author. But a bit of his backstory: he was born in 1957 in Nottingham, in England. He grew up in council estate, from what I've gathered, so pretty working class family. His father was a printer. His early exposure to literature came through his local libraries, and he developed a love for reading and history. He had an affinity for learning about World War II, especially. So that was where you can see that the blueprints were there from early on. When he grew up, he studied English literature at Selwyn College, and then went to Cambridge. And after that, he became a full-time journalist. So he worked for a student paper initially called Varsity, and that's what got him his groundwork in journalism.
And I must say, his on his journalistic approach, I really appreciate that in his writing.
Yeah,
you know, we've spoken about, like, obviously George Orwell was a journalist as well.
Yeah,
and then, like, I really appreciate, like, simple structured style. Like, you know, when we think of the book, right? He's got, like, you know, it's like it's in 4 parts, and each part, this chapter start again, like, you know, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, part 2, chapter 1. It just everything flows nicely. He's straight to the point at times, isn't he?
Yeah. No, he's very good point, and I think it's interesting. I think someone can definitely be a journalist and transition to an author, like a fiction author. But then if you did it the other way around, I don't think it'd be the same kind of impact. Because with journalism, it's kind of like you got to be to the point, factual.
You have to boil it down.
Yeah. And you got to lure people, hook them in, right?
Yeah.
So off the bat, he hooks you in straight away when you're reading it. You know, he sets the tone and the feeling of it straight off the bat. So he's very good at doing that. So, but I think that comes from being a journalist back in the day. So, from what I gathered too, he joined the BBC in the late 1970s and worked on programs like Panorama and Newsnight. I don't know too much about those programs, but they're pretty big deals, aren't they, in the UK?
Yeah, staples. Yeah.
Staples, yeah. So that's a big one there. And his journalistic instincts, like, he worked on his craft, got better, and he then transitioned into a political commentator and correspondent as well. So he started writing for a paper called The Observer, and then it also followed by, he came a columnist for the Sunday Times and the Daily Telegraph. And then he's decided to then write books, the non-fiction variety. So he wrote a book in 1986 called Selling Hitler. And that's also about the forged Hitler diary scandals, showcasing, he had a knack for blending a bit of investigative journalism with a narrative flair to it, as described.
Yeah. The actually, the forged Hitler diaries is interesting, because I read that as well, and I think I didn't know what that was. But apparently this is a huge influence on. It was a huge influence on, like, actually writing Fatherland, because this is what made him imagine, or got his mind working, and what a world would look like if the Axis powers had one. But I suppose, the forged Hitler diary scandal, like, it was April 1983. There was a German magazine called STEM, and it announced that it had acquired 62 handwritten volumes of Adolf Hitler's personal diaries, allegedly recovered from a 1945 plane crash in Dresden. They'd been supplied by a fellow by the name of Konrad Kujau, so he was a West German forger and dealer in Nazi memorabilia, and he sold it for over 9 million Deutschmark. So I don't know what that is in US dollars, but I assume that's quite high.
Yeah.
So, like, apparently all the major outlets, like, Times of London, Newsweek, they all backed the find. Everyone got behind it. Even a renowned historian by the name of Hugh Trevor Roper, he had vouched for their authenticity. But then a few weeks later, forensic testing exposed them as fakes. So the ink contained modern chemicals. The paper was post-war. Handwriting analysis showed that it wasn't Hitler's. And, historical inaccuracies in them actually further revealed that they were written in hindsight as well. But, the reputation of Stern, who actually reported it, the magazine, reputation collapsed. Several editors resigned. Both the actual fellow who sold them, Kujau, and the journalist, Gerd Heidemann, were actually jailed for fraud. So it was but it was Harris, it was Robert Harris that was actually covering the story as a journalist.
Yeah. And
then went on to write Selling Hitler, which you mentioned there.
Yeah.
So but that's what that whole project actually sparked, the deeper, like, what if curiosity about it. We have to credit that for Fatherland,
Yeah, it triggered something to get going forward with this kind of that kind of inspiration for what we see later on with Fatherland. But and another one of his most famous works after Selling Hitler was Good and Faithful, and it came out in 1990, and it was a biography about Bernard Ingham, who was Margaret Thatcher's press secretary, which would be really intriguing to see, because, as we all know, Margaret Thatcher's a very divisive character in British political history, isn't she? So interesting to see that take on it. And from what I can gather, he seems to be more left-leaning, like a Labour voter. But apparently recently, due to things like identity politics stuff, he's kind of wavered a little bit towards not following it as much and going towards that social democrat side of it. So, but then after that, obviously he wrote his most famous book that got the ball rolling in his non-fiction, which is what the topic of today is, which is Fatherland, 1992. The book has been translated to 25 languages, and it got adapted to that beautiful HBO film.
Oh, a fantastic made-for-TV
film, which we loved, you know.
With a great ending.
Yeah, because I haven't watched it because I remember you telling me the way it ends, and from what and when other people have said of it online, when I've looked into it, I'm like, I don't want to be thinking about that ending. I want to be thinking about the way the book is. So I'm like, I don't want to poison my mind with it. I'll probably watch it after now and give my thoughts.
Yeah, watch it after.
Yeah,
it's not the worst movie in the world. It's just. It doesn't do the book any justice. Yeah. Anyway, we'll save that for later.
Save it later. Yeah. Yeah. So then that got him established as like kind of like the master of historical fiction too. And you got to think too at this time too. There was not many alternative history novels or concepts like that. So you had obviously The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick, which came out, and this was kind of like another one that's showcasing the what if scenario. So this kind of got put more into the mainstream again, and an interesting way of thinking about it because. Yeah, it wasn't like a particular mainstream kind of topic or genre. So you got to give me credit for that.
Yeah.
And then obviously later on he wrote The Enigma in 1995.
Yeah, there was a movie that came out. I think Cate Blanchett was in that. I think in maybe 2000, 2001.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I have to give it a watch, but yeah, that would be interesting. And then later on he went to another one called Archangel, which is like a Stalin era mystery as well.
I think in post-Soviet Russia.
Yeah, so that would be interesting as well. To go into another time, but yeah, he went more into ancient history later on with his works in the early and mid 2000s. So he went to the Cicero trilogy, which was Imperium, Lustrum, and Dictator, and that traces the life of the Roman orator Cicero. So he blended a bit of the political intrigue and the philosophical depth to it. So
yeah, I know. You also there was one because I was looking at when I'd finished the book this week. I think, you know what, I wouldn't mind reading more of them, and I was looking for some more books. I must say, nothing really tickled my fancy when I was going through, but there was one, I was looking at that, but there's another one, Pompeii, which was 2003, I think, but set during the eruption of Vesuvius, the volcano eruption. And I just I'm thinking, I didn't even know what to think of that. I'd be interested to read it though,
Yeah, because it's kind of like through the eyes of a Roman engineer or something, isn't it? From what I gather,
that concept, because I must say that sort of, I guess it's ancient history. I've always been a little bit weak there. You know what I mean? Like, I know dribs and drabs, but I must say I find it tough to sort of...
Yeah, I'm in the same kind. I always prefer modern, but a couple of years ago, I went into a bit of a Roman Empire kind of arc kind of thing where I read about... So I always wanted to understand like why Julius Caesar was so prominent and all these other ones, and how the Roman Empire fall and this kind of stuff. But yeah, no, but Pompeii in particular. Have you ever been to it before? To Naples?
No,
I've been to it actually, and it's interesting because you see that the famous, with the volcanic sculptures and stuff of, people died on the set. But yeah, it is crazy to see like how you imagine people living their lives at that time in that ancient society, and then the next, this massive explosion happens, and then the volcano. It's actually closer than you think it is, and you're like, oh wow, it would have been really frightening for the people at the time. So it'd be interesting to see that kind of point of view.
It would have been apocalyptic.
Oh yeah, you would think the gods were turning against you. Yeah, especially back then. So
cool. There was also like another back in the Second World War as well. He did, and it became a Netflix movie in 2017, Munich.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah, and that focused on sort of Neville Chamberlain and the lead up to the Second World War and everything. And it gave an account of that, and I didn't mind. It was pretty. It was an okay film. Like,
yeah, it feels like, unfortunately for him, some of his movies just haven't, or his work hasn't gotten to that the proper love and care it deserves, or like that kind of that prominence.
I guess by the very nature of it being a film, and you're trying to boil it down to an hour and a half, they simplify a lot of shit.
Yeah,
and a lot of what he says, particularly in the book we're going to go into today, there's a lot of ambiguity and
well, a lot more character development.
There's the politics of it all. There's or what you would say real politic.
Yeah,
like this is how it works in the real world, and he really explores that, where the movies can kind of, for very nature, separate it like between good and evil. You're like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. And then have to obviously cut corners too, because they've only got like 2-3 hours max to do it. So like they got to
should really be a series.
Yeah. They should do like an HBO mini series for it. That'd be perfect. Like similar to what they did to Chernobyl, where it was like 6 episodes. That'd be perfect.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, on that, I want to get into it later, but like even like the I know we should stay on target, but just while it's a good segue into what I want to say. Like reading the book, but basically like, the partnership between like Max Jaeger and Xavier March, when it kind of reminds me of that, like between like McNulty and Bunk in like The Wire.
Yeah.
And like, it's like that whole, like that detective noir, like I guess The Wire, I guess maybe True Detective, like the first season, like set in this sort of alternate history. That's kind of, it's got HBO written all over it. Like, you know what I mean? It would be just a perfect HBO miniseries.
Oh, it would be, definitely. Yeah. And I'd be fascinating to see it from that point, because like, and we've seen it work too with Matt and the High Castle, right? So like, there's definitely something that could be done. So yeah, and from what I can gather too, like I think there's an interview with him in 2012, and he still says like the movie's dog shit. And then even recently in 2024 or something, he said the same thing again, like he doubled down on it. So it's not like one of those ones where you're like, oh, at the time I didn't like it, but now I've gotten older, I've grown to appreciate it. It's like, nah,
it's got worse.
Still got worse. Still hate it. Well, from what I've read too with the film, it was originally meant to be like a proper, cinema release thing, but then they didn't allocate enough budget to it or something like that. Then they decided, we'll just make it a TV movie. And back then, TV movies were not the best.
Oh, mate, the CGI when you see like the Vauxhall in the distance, and it's like the score as well with the shitty music and the. It's TV movie written all over it.
And also too, when it's like 90s CGI too, it doesn't age well, has it?
Yeah, it makes Mortal Kombat look good.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Mother, you're alive. Too bad you will die.
And yeah, so just on like getting back to him writing Fatherland. I was mentioning about the the Forged Hitler diaries and everything. So, as I say, as he was researching and writing his book called Selling Hitler, he actually began to ask what the world would look like if Nazi Germany had actually won the war. So initially, it's actually in the book, there's like a foreword he writes about his thought process. And he was saying, so initially he actually considered presenting the idea as like conventional what if. So he had maps and timelines and everything, but then it only got him so far, and he realized, no, the only way to actually to research this would be would allow for a deeper, more human exploration of the scenario, which is eventually why he landed on the whole sort of detective noir sort of style. Because I think he had like half the book written, and it was through like 3 or 4 different perspectives, and there was a detective, there was there might have been a cleaner, and there might have been a politician, and he realized like he sort of just ripped it all up, and the only one that he found entertaining was the detective style. So just that thought of like I think he wrote it, and then for a year or so he just left it. He didn't like it.
Sat on it, yeah.
And he'd read it again. He goes, "Nah, the only bit I'm actually finding entertaining is the bit that we read." So it's interesting because I guess the whole detective style, you get to sort of lead the inner workings of the Gestapo and the SS, and then the politics of it all. Like it's really cool, but his key aims for this book, so through Fatherland, he actually wanted to explore like the 3 unsettling questions that he asked himself. So, had Hitler won the war, how might he have explained away the disappearance of 6 to 10 million Jews to both his people and the outside world? How ordinary Germans might have reacted to living in, I guess, the Lebensraum, the colonial settlements in Eastern Europe, and whether Hitler, after the dust had settled, would have been treated like, say, Mao or Stalin, the way we look back at him now.
Yeah.
Like, we sort of look back as they're just dictators recognized as a Cold War power, but we don't really look too much further.
No.
But I think they're probably some good talking points to start with, if you like.
Well, it's interesting, but it's kind of like how you said, touch on the Stalin, when before World War II started, when before Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, he was always ostracized and treated as a pariah, Stalin. But then he became Uncle Joe to everyone after that, because now an enemy of my enemy is my friend now. Yeah, so that's what we
exactly
view him.
right. Well, the funny thing on Stalin as well is the fact that and there's parts in this book that we will get into later, but it talks about obviously a big part of German victory. To achieve victory would have to have been successful in Operation Barbarossa, which, as we know, didn't happen. Yeah. So, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
in our timeline, Yeah. But I guess we get to that point where, like, I guess Hitler splits the 2 army groups between the oil fields of Baku and Stalingrad for no other reason that I guess it had Stalin's name in it. I guess they could have stopped kind of it was an industrial city which was kind of funding the war, but they could have done that anywhere down the Volga. It didn't have to be there, but it seemed to be just because it had his name in it. It was like symbolic.
Yeah.
But had he concentrated all his forces on sort of one or the other, it might have been a different story. Far fetched, but it could have been.
Or was the old thing where they could see the dome of the Kremlin too in Moscow? They were 15 miles away. Where if they went all their efforts to capture Moscow, would have that been a symbolism of the collapse of the Soviet Union and Stalin fleeing elsewhere? Like
but
I think one ifs. Yeah,
it was like this. It was like the military hubris of like Germany at the time, where like they France had rolled over, they'd walked into Norway, like everyone had just collapsed, all these major powers, and within days I think they'd captured I don't know how many millions of Soviet troops they'd captured.
Oh, it was
They're in
insane.
disarray. So there was that sort of element of hubris, like, oh, fuck, it's just days away, we'll be all right.
Yeah.
But there was this like ideological blindness, like the funny thing of like when they were, you're talking about Uncle Joe and everything, like they could have, the way they sort of treated, well, we know the way he thought of Slavs, we know what he thought of the Jewish people, but I mean, what he thought of Slavs was worse, right?
Well, that's what was called Lebensraum, right?
Yeah, Lebensraum. What would he say? The Untermenschen, that's what they were,
Yeah.
which basically racially inferior. That's kind of his thought process. But the way they didn't exactly go in there and win the hearts and minds of the peasants. So you think particularly people in the Ukraine would have probably joined.
Oh no, they welcomed the Germans liberators when they came through. Yeah.
But he just put them down and killed them and slaughtered.
Yeah.
Where they would have joined the fight against Uncle Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Among all of it, the biggest mistake Hitler made was making Stalin look like a good bloke.
Yeah.
And he pushed them in his heart, and it's just creating an enemy that, I guess, that were kind of fighting in their own country and creating this fear, and then making himself worse than Stalin, who, as we know, was a monster,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, because going through it too, it got me thinking, like, why would Robert Harris write this book initially? Like, right, we talked about, he's always had an affinity for the World War II and the battles and the history behind it and stuff. But he decided to come up with the idea around like late 80s, early 90s for writing Fatherland. And this was at a time too when, the Berlin Wall collapsed and the Eastern Bloc, the totalitarian, USSR was in chaos, and every country was vying for their independence within that Soviet bloc, and then same with Central Europe as well. And we're seeing, and then there's a massive feeling, especially in the West in general, and obviously Western Europe, where we're the good guys won, we're superior, democracy rules all kind of thing. So it got him thinking about, and this is great that the West won, but what happens if it was the opposite way around? What if we fell and they were the ones that were in control and had control of everything like that? So he wanted to imagine a world where if totalitarian government was entrenched in the bureaucracy and was considered like part of everyday life and controlling of everything within Germany. So that's why he set it 20 years after the end of World War II in the 60s, because he wanted to see how the benevolence of people living their lives within the German Reich would be like. So it's a very interesting thing to go down that path, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this is a big part of him setting it in the 60s, right? Because it wasn't so far away from when it came out in the 90s. Like, you still had jet travel, you had the Beatles, conceivably all of the, the Nazi party members or the influential guys would have still been alive at the time.
Yeah.
It was almost the perfect time to set it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think around that time too was when Rudolf Hess would have passed away too. So, and he was the last of that, Hitler's inner circle, one of those high officials within the German Reich that, died within very close to that timeline. So I guess too, that would have been, still at the forefront of people's minds, as you were saying, like, early, like, it's only 30 years from that point of view. So, and him being the last one to die off too is kind of like, with time, people kind of forget the atrocities of what happened sometimes. So it could have been like another friendly reminder, hey, if this kind of went down this path, it would be in a lot different, scarier world.
It would have been, but also, funnily enough, like, it's how normal it all feels. And if you think of like America in the 60s, we've spent a lot of time, I feel like, over the last few weeks talking about McCarthyism and the House Un-American policies and the whole conformity age in the US. And you read it, and in the Cold War and everything, and how Soviet Union's the enemy, where this just flips it on its head, and they're the Truman Doctrine essentially, or whatever their equivalent of the Truman Doctrine, the US is sort of funding Soviet guerrilla fighters against in the Urals and everything. But where Germany, everything's conformed, and you're like, the weird or the kind of uncomfortable thing is, it's not so different from our time.
Yeah.
When you're reading it, you know what I mean? Like, it's...
Yeah, what's interesting too, because we've done, obviously, Wolfenstein, and then there's The Man in the High Castle. I'll just briefly touch on. So Wolfenstein is that it's over the top. They discover that ancient technology that makes the Nazis win, and they control the whole world. And it's a bit far-fetched, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, not a bit, a lot.
A lot, yeah. I was underplaying it. And then Man in the High Castle is a little bit plausible, where you could say, like, if it did fall, like, they got, nuclear weapons that, the Japanese and then the Americans the Japanese and the Germans conquered America and controlled half and half. Yeah, but I'd say...
But then it brings a time travel element.
It's a bit weird and stuff.
Yeah.
But then out of all of them, I think this one's the most, like, what's so terrifying about it is the most realistic one. You feel like it could happen. And if it felt like if it did go down this path, that, it would come normalize, and the society that we see in the book is what it would be like, and how everyone could just, everyone's buying into it, and just can just dismiss things like, like we'll go into it later, but they've shipped the meat kind of mentality, where it's, we don't question it.
Well, it's that concept of the banality of evil. Hannah Arendt, she was I think she was a German American journalist, but she was present at the trial of Adolf Eichmann, and how he was just saying, I was just doing my job. It's like evil's not. It's just the everydayness of being evil. I'm just following orders. The bureaucracy of it. You're not evil for the sake of being evil. You're just sort of following orders. Essentially, it's that like everyone's kind of complicit, but they're going about their daily lives.
Yeah, like it's actually kind of similar to when we talked about the Milgram obedience study in the lottery episode. How when an authority figure tells you to do something, you're more likely to go along with it than not go along with it. So then it gets to the point where you're doing things like crimes against humanity on an industrial scale. Like where do you draw the line, or are you just part of it, or are you like
Yeah, I think you're so entrenched that.
Yeah, but also too, there's so much like degrees of separation from it too, where it's easy to go along with it, not thinking about it, right? So I mean, we've touched on other episodes too, where it's not on this scale, but like we're kind of conformists in other ways. Other people would consider evil. Obviously with like food supplies, with animals and
factory
farming, and the exploitation of low third world countries with where our iPhones come from and stuff like that. So
yeah, we don't question it.
We don't question it.
But it's very nature. It's wrong.
It is wrong, exactly. So, but back to what we're saying about with Eichmann, like it's just like you're saying the banality of evil, where it's just he's just saying I'm following orders, but then he's got no sense of like what those orders were going towards and what they represented. So, but in this world where when the victors can write history and where they can dictate what is said and what isn't said, then no one's questioning it. Why would you question it? It's just it is what it is now, isn't it? That's the scary thing about it.
It is.
Yeah,
it's a scary thing because it feels so much like the US in the 60s. There's relatively just different enemy. Like it just doesn't.
It'd be like a plug and play. Yeah, pop this one out, next one in.
And you can genuinely. 10 years ago when I read the book, there's a few things in there. I mean, I really enjoyed it, but I read it more from the sense of alternate history. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I didn't really have a good understanding as I do of the Cold War now. And you're reading it with like Cold War politics in mind, and you're like, oh god, this is like it hits really different now.
Oh, absolutely.
And I understand it more, and I in many ways might have just been like the most perfect novel. I just think the setting, the detective noir, the twists and the turns, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's one of those books that you don't want to put down, like, or you'll one more chapter, then another chapter goes, and then you're like, oh shit, I've read 100 pages. And like, what's going on? I got to go to bed now. Yeah, it is like that. It's one of the. It's rare that a book, because I think it is a problem with these days. We've touched on about how we're all addicted to our phones and our attention spans getting smaller. Where sometimes we are reading a book, you're like, okay, when's the chapter ending? I want to go to sleep, or I want to do something else now. Where this one was like, no, I want to keep reading it.
You get to the end of something and it'll kind of leave you on a cliffhanger. You're like,
oh, and you got to find out. Yeah,
I want to read another one.
Yeah, it is like that. Yeah. And I like the way he spaces out the chapters too. He makes it, you can digest it in little parts as well too. Yeah, and it's not a hard read as well, which is good. And I mean, it could be hard in the way of like normalizing evil, but as in like it's an easy read as opposed to like you're not like having to Google every 2 seconds to understand what a saying is or something.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, maybe because we have sort of an understanding of the Second World War. I don't know. I could understand someone who wasn't so much into it.
Yeah. I understand. Like if they're using like different, like if you're using like like the plans and stuff, then definitely, or like locations. But it's not like you're using those extravagant English language words. You're like, what the hell does that mean?
But in saying that, I guess you wouldn't have to necessarily have an understanding of the Second World War. I mean, it would definitely hit harder. But you wouldn't necessarily have. You could just have a basic understanding of it and still appreciate it for the twists and turns and everything, couldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Purely as like a detective. It's funny. I was watching this lady on YouTube review it, and she was saying because she reviews a lot of books, and her subconscious bias always goes towards detective novels, and she was like, "No, I'm going to break the mold and do Fatherland this week." Reading, and then our viewers are getting a shit for it, going like, "What are you doing reading?" Because I didn't know it was like that, but it was just. It works so well together. Like it mixes so well.
Perfect narrative.
It is, yeah.
It actually reminded me reading it this time around of our episode of White Bear, but it was like, oh fucking hell! I'm complicit in it. It sells. It's just great. It's just a great story,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, absolutely. Well, anything else on Robert Harris you want to touch on before we get into the novel itself?
No. What we'll do, we'll actually get into the. I'll read through a bit of a summary of it. Before I do that, today we are drinking. I've bought a beer. It's called Pseudo Capital Lager. and it's a South Korean beer that I purely bought. I went down the bottler, and it was $12. It was $12 for six. That's $2 a can.
$6. It's like $1 an hour.
In this day and age,
I had no intention of going in there and buying it, but it was like on South Park when Walmart was lowering its prices as a self-defense mechanism. I can't go on, Stan. I have to buy this.
Dad!
The screwdriver set is only $9.98!
Come on, Dad!
I can't make it, boys! You're gonna have to go on without me!
No, Dad, we need your keys!
This bargain is too great for me! I'm gonna have to buy these! Here, take the keys and go on! The television department is near the back, next to the cell phones! Go, hurry!
Mate, you should start work for the bottle, then you get even more savings.
And I've got to say, it's clean, it's crisp. You know how much, like when you'd have a Japanese lager, or like, have you ever had any Korean lagers and stuff?
Not Korean, no.
Yeah.
We have Japanese.
But you know that clean, crisp sort of taste that would very much go with the food and everything.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just that. It's. I mean, I don't know if it's $12 as like an introductory offer, but fantastic.
It's doing the job.
It's doing the job.
Good to hear. Yeah.
All right. So just to read the summary of the book here. So Robert Harris's Fatherland is a historical thriller set in an alternate 1964 where Nazi Germany won World War II. Adolf Hitler is still alive, and Berlin has now been transformed into Germania, a vast imperial capital built on Albert Speer's architectural dreams. The story follows Xavier March, a detective in the Kriminalpolizei who investigates the suspicious death of a high-ranking Nazi official. What begins as a routine case quickly spirals into a dangerous conspiracy. Marsh discovers that the dead man was part of a circle of old Nazi leaders being silenced to hide the truth about the Holocaust. In this world, the final solution has been erased from public knowledge. The regime has rewritten history, and ordinary Germans live in willful ignorance. But March's investigation, alongside American journalist Charlie Maguire, threatens to expose the cover-up. As March uncovers documents proving the mass extermination of Europe's Jews, the regime closes in. With the world watching, Hitler is about to celebrate his 75th birthday and host peace talks with the US. The truth could destabilize the Reich. The novel blends alternate history with noir detective fiction, exploring themes of denial, complicity, and how societies rewrite reality to protect power. It asks what people are willing to ignore in order to survive, and what happens when the truth becomes too dangerous to tell.
Yeah, wow. That's the summary of it all. But yeah, it goes into so much more detail than that, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the actual book itself and the time, because obviously the novel follows like was a week's period right from 1964 for those 3 or 4 days or so leading up to Hitler's birthday. But I think like what would be interesting is to set the timeline and see what happened, how the society was formed. So what I'll do a comparison for what happened in our timeline and then what's in the Fatherland timeline. So in 1939, this is both Fatherland's timeline and our timeline. Germany invades Poland, Britain and France declare war. So that's all, we know that pretty well. In our timeline, Germany defeats France. Battle of Britain ends with the RAF winning the battle and Britain remains in the war. In Fatherland's timeline, Germany defeats France. The Luftwaffe wins the Battle of Britain and Britain sues for peace. Nazi occupation or strong influence over the UK. So that gets the ball rolling there. And then that eventually leads to Churchill and the Queen escaping to Canada. In 1941, in our timeline, Germany invades the USSR, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor, and then the US enters the war. In Fatherland, Germany invades USSR and wins quickly, capturing Moscow. The US stays out of the European war and focuses only on Japan. In 1942 to 1943, this is the turning point of World War II in our timeline. Stalingrad and Kursk halt the German advance. In the Fatherland timeline, the USSR surrenders after major defeats, and Germany dominates from the Atlantic to the Urals, so they have complete control of the sea lanes and everything like that. In our timeline, in 1944, D-Day invasion happens in Normandy. The Allies advance into France. In 1944, there's no D-Day at all. Germany consolidates rule over Europe, so they conquer every territory. In 1945, in our timeline, Germany surrenders in May. The Holocaust is exposed. The Cold War begins between the US and the USSR. In 1945, in the Fatherland timeline, Germany develops atomic weapons. The Holocaust is completed in secret. Records are mostly destroyed. Cold War style standoff between Greater Germany Reich and the US begins. So In our timeline, in the late 1940s, the USSR and US engage in a nuclear arms race, and NATO is formed. In Fatherland, the US and Germany begin an arms race, and Nazi Europe is stable under the totalitarian rule of the Nazi regime. And now, throughout the 1950s, in our timeline, there's an economic boom in the Western Europe, and there's a lot of decolonization and things like that. In Fatherland, the Nazi Empire expands and influences worldwide. Unrest is conquered and territory suppressed. Then we get to the 1960s. So our timeline, we saw a lot of social change, civil rights movement in the West, cultural shifts as well. In Fatherland's timeline, Nazi society remains authoritarian and racially stratified. Dissent is harshly punished. So we see that all throughout the book. And finally, in 1964, in our timeline, the Cold War is at its height. There's Germany's obviously split into West and East, and that's when the Berlin Wall starts to go up. In the timeline in Fatherland, Hitler's turning 75. The US president is arriving in Berlin, and that's when the plot of the book starts to begin. So I just thought it'd be good to give a bit of historical context for both their timeline and our timeline, just so to show the differences and little subtleties here and there. So basically, what he's done is just swapped the USSR out and plugged in Nazi Germany if they won World War II.
Yeah, he has. But you know what's really interesting in it is how much Operation Barbarossa, like the turning point that was, that fateful invasion of the USSR in our timeline. We touched on a little bit earlier, like Hitler splitting into the three army groups. One going for Moscow, one was going for the oil fields in Baku, one was going for Stalingrad, and they were very close to winning. But had he consolidated on one objective, it might have been a little bit different. But look, there's a few things you go into,
Yeah, definitely. Now, what I found very interesting was the Battle of Britain, because you could argue that was a pivotal point in World War II where if Britain did lose that and Churchill was ousted and was exiled and removed of power, and then you get someone wanting to make peace with Hitler, and Hitler could just fortify and certify his areas in Western Europe and then just focus solely on that is a big turning point. And then with Churchill's gone, is he lobbying the Americans to get into the war, getting supplies? They cut that off. Maybe he does go down that path. It is definitely it's a very important battle, that one.
Well, Battle of Britain. I mean, because that's the thing with Germany. If they needed aerial dominance to actually stage an invasion of Britain, but they also needed. There's this something about Britain being standing alone, and in many ways they did, but they stood alone and they had a massive colony of. But they also had the world's strongest navy too. Yeah. But that's the thing. But they were, and I think it mentions in here as well. Like they win the Battle of the Atlantic, and they basically starve Britain into submission, don't they? Yeah. Yeah. So basically, they have no choice but to surrender.
And then also later on, we find out that the Germans figure out that. The British have cracked the Enigma codes and they stop using it. So then then that helps in that way as well.
Yeah, it's funny. I always found the the USSR invasion. It's so integral, I think, to the way history turns, in the sense because had they not in our timeline been stopped at Stalingrad and Kursk and pushed back and then hit on the counterattack, then the Soviets were the first to find evidence of concentration camps, and the Holocaust comes to light because of that. Yeah, you know what I mean. And then look, it was the Russian counterattack or the Soviet counterattack at Stalingrad that they pushed back, and then it was in Poland that I think the Soviets found the first evidence of the death camps and everything like that. And then the further they get, I guess more becomes known about it. It's so how integral that whole invasion was.
Oh, absolutely.
There's talk that it was the Russian winter, but in actual,
it's a factor.
It is a factor, but as you dig a little bit deeper into it, and I won't go into all of it on here. That's probably a 12-part series
in itself. Yeah,
but there's little things like I think the whole German blitzkrieg. It's I suppose to understand the blitzkrieg, it's fast movement, it's pincer movements, encircling enemies, lightning. But it was dependent on automotive, like tanks, and there's even little things about Operation Barbarossa where I think when Germany and France had rolled over in about 6 weeks, I think France was the second most automotive nation on the planet. So there was a car to every 8 people, which meant there was lots of petrol stations. I think in Russia there was a car to every 4,000 people. It's just little things like that.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
They could have never won it because they only knew one way of fighting, right? It's a bit like Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham, mate. No plan B, just do plan A better. Yeah, ideologically they were just never going to win that. Yeah. But as I said before, had they kind of consolidated and perhaps said, Hitler was obsessed with resources, hence why he wanted to go to like the oil fields of Baku, because I think he was obsessed, and probably rightly so, in the sense he knew there was going to be a long war with the US coming up. He knew that was going to be, and he needed resources for that. So hence why it was sort of all or nothing for those oil fields.
Yeah.
What he was going to do with the oil fields when I don't know, but the idea of it. So I guess had he sort of had all his forces go for that, then possibly it could have been different. I mean, I'm not so sure, but it's logical, right? It's just hence why the books.
Yeah. Well, I think to just looking back on it in retrospective, like they were never going to win the USSR. Beat the
too
Soviets.
vast.
Too vast.
Supply lines were too
supply
stretched.
line, exactly. Yeah. It was almost an impossible task. Even in today's standards, it would be almost impossible to do it, to pull it off.
I mean, the parallels between what Putin's doing in the Ukraine and Operation Barbarossa is incredible. He thought they'd roll over. And he's like, you're invading a country that's going to defend themselves, and they're defending their own country, Yeah.
I mean, the first couple of days, it felt like, Kiev's going to fall any second now.
Yeah.
But then they held out, and obviously being heavily supported by the Western, NATO allied countries is helping a lot too. But yeah.
Well, that's the thing. We'll get into a bit later, the Lend-Lease thing. I mean, I think it was the US was the equivalent of today, I think it was 11 billion. They sent the equivalent of like $250 billion worth of resources that like were backing the Soviets back then. So it's the parallels are incredible.
And back to what we were saying before, that's how he became Uncle Joe. But yeah, that's why touching on back to the Battle of Britain. Sorry, within this timeline, is that why it was so vital? Is that it kept America out of it. So America then weren't supplying Britain and then the Soviets. I mean, they were supporting them like down the track in the Cold War sense, but there was no American troops or there was no Eisenhower, no General Patton in European land there. So it keeps them. It's a whole different aspect too, and they're focusing solely on fighting the Japanese. So. No, it's a very interesting concept, and as I've touched on earlier, this one feels like the most plausible timeline out of all the alternative histories we've ventured into. So, no, it's very intriguing. But yeah, we're just going through it before, how it leads up perfectly to the start of the novel in 1964, where the Nazi regime has been well entrenched in the culture and the society. All the war crimes, what war crimes, brother? They never existed. Yes, they've all been shipped east, whatever that means. He touches on too that throughout the book too that. While, obviously the whole big part of Hitler kept going towards this was for Lebensraum, living space for the German people, and they're paying people to go out to the east to resettle and claim that land, but then the people out there don't, slowly rumors and reports get back to people in the Berlin and stuff about how it's not as all sunshine and roses out there, because they're fighting guerrilla forces of Soviet people, which obviously would be fighting against them, and why would you want to be living out there, like thousands of kilometers from where you are from, and where the home territories, where everything's perfectly set up in the society within this totalitarian society? Like, why would you go out further there? It makes no sense. Like, it's so far stretched.
This is one of the bits, and this is what he wanted to address. This is one of his things that he wanted to address in the novel, that he was saying about how realistic was this Lebensraum thing.
Yeah, it's all fantasy, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, as we know, if you've read Mein Kampf, which look I have, and again, I'm not going to say I'm not condoning anything he did, but just to get an understanding, like in the sense he talks about it. He talks about it was I guess the whole concept of Lebensraum or living space was essential as like a buffer zone. It was essential for Germany to become self-sufficient, and that's kind of where the thought was coming from. So the whole invasion of the USSR was for this living space, right?
Yeah.
The plausibility of this, the novel goes into the details. They've got train lines that go all the way to like the Urals and stuff like that. But it mentions like what's actually happening, as you say, is this guerrilla warfare, and nobody can actually live there. They can work there in the day, but then they have to go to like security camps at night because they're being attacked by what they call quote unquote terrorists.
Yeah. But
these Soviet guerrilla fighters are being backed by the US, so this kind of brings into that. This sort of alternate Truman Doctrine thing that's going on.
It's definitely got Vietnam War vibes to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. But the plausibility of this, as we say, I spoke about Lend-Lease in 1941. So just to give you an idea of what Lend-Lease was, it was an act passed by Franklin Roosevelt in 1941, where it basically allowed the US to lend/lease war supplies to nations deemed vital to US defense. Primarily, in the beginning, it was Britain, who was sort of standing. This was before Operation Barbarossa, but then it went to the USSR, who, as we know, and I think as we've discussed before, don't get the credit they deserve for the amount of death that or the amount of bodies they gave to this war effort. They foot half the bill of the Second World War.
Oh, it's over 20 million.
25, I think, in terms of
insane.
But they did all the bleeding, but I think the equivalent it was $11 billion I think of aid they gave them, which by today's standards is $250 billion.
Yeah.
So
it's
yeah,
astronomical. Yeah.
like the feasibility in the book of them had the war sort of ended and the Nazi Germany won, America, you believe, would still be, particularly what we saw in our time with the Truman Doctrine, would still be supplying them. So it's very logical in that sense, you know?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
100%. But yeah, well, that just gives us a bit of backstory, a bit of context of the setup and the lead up to the events unfolding, because Hitler's birthday is April 20th, I believe.
I think that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
And the subtleness with the the propaganda that I think they mention, there's a line in the book where they say, the week off for Easter has been replaced with a week off for Hitler's birthday.
Yeah,
it's all these little propaganda things that they just sort of backed in with the holidays and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, basically, what starts the ball rolling for the book is there's a body being found in the Berlin's Havel River, and Detective Xavier March, our main character of the book, he's not meant to be taking this call. He's meant to be his day off, but because he's a divorced father and he has nothing better to do, he decides to take the call and investigates the floating body. We later find out that the body in question is a high official within the government called Joseph Bueller. And he was a senior Nazi official one time, and he was connected to the general government in occupied Poland. So, and
he was a lawyer or something as well, wasn't he?
I believe so. Yeah, the lawyer, and I think later on we'll go into like the characters in the book, but then go into like the actual what happened to them in real life as well, like in our timeline. So it'd be interesting to see what they're like. But what we kind of see, as I said before, we see that basically it establishes that March was a World War II veteran. He was on one of the U-boats. And he was, fought pretty bravely and was amongst it a lot. But then he was always intrigued and wanted to investigate things always, right? So that's part of his character trope. And he kind of is mistrusted by his colleagues as well, because he kind of doesn't, because he's questioning and he's inquisitive. He doesn't just take things on face value and doesn't turn a blind eye to things. He wants to find out things. And he kind of doesn't fit the mold too of being just a part of the party and just going along those guidelines, and even to the point where his own son doesn't like him. He chastises him and says you're not good enough and you don't follow the party line enough and that kind of thing.
We see this like the indoctrination through his son Pilly, don't we?
Yeah.
When his son's like he's doing loyalty oaths and he's like head of the class and the Hitler Youth, and he just loves it, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's too established because and this is another reason why Robert Harris set the timeline 20 years after, is that this whole generation has grown up knowing nothing but Nazi indoctrination and ideology, so they would be like that. And the ones that grew up with it too, back in say the late 1930s and early 40s, like they're all in their 20s and 30s now. And now the youth, it's all they've known. It's all they would know. They would know no other form of life or thought process. So it's completely, and that's the whole point with these systems and totalitarian governments. They indoctrinate the youth and stop any other kind of will contend against it in a way that they stifle it out. So you can see why the kid would be like that and hate his father for not being 100% ideological like he is. Yeah.
Well, actually, just on that indoctrination and everything and the way everything's so controlled, there are little cracks of resistance through here. You see little bits of graffiti. I think do they call them like the White Rose or something, like a student movement?
I believe so.
I think it's the White Rose where they talk about it. I think there's there's ironic sort of tags on the wall saying have fun or else you'll be arrested, sort of thing, something along those lines. There's little cracks of like anti-authoritarian themes established. There's students wearing jeans and reading. I think even George Orwell gets a mention. There's a little bit, and I wonder how something like that would sort of seep into this society.
Yeah, it does. Even though like it's all ruling, all controlling, but like we saw that through the Soviet Union, right? There was always people counter-revolutionary against or counter-culture against whatever the norm was. We see it in North Korea today, where they're smuggling in Western DVDs and literature and music and stuff as well. So there always will be pockets of resistance against it, but it's obviously it gets stamped out, it gets quashed pretty quickly. And I guess too, like this generation, even though they've been indoctrinated from growing up, but then they weren't part of the struggle or the fight. They don't remember the times of when Germany was on its knees and during the Great Depression, and that they've just grown up knowing luxury and happy lifestyle kind of thing, haven't they?
There's bits in the book where it mentions that I think some senior officials or someone mentions that there's a weakness to the German people now. They've got the taste of luxury, and it kind of reminds me of that quote. I think what's it? The peacetime or wartime makes strong men create good times, and
Good times create weak men, and weak mate create bad times.
That cycle. Yeah.
It is like that. Yeah. I mean, if you've grown up knowing nothing but, luxury and taste for lifestyle and things like that, you're not going to have that gritted edge to it and blindly follow to the point of wanting to stamp things out. You want to kind of get a bit more inquisitive, I guess. Like some of these, but then obviously in this regime though, everything's still very tightly controlled though. So there's only little pockets here and there that we see through the book. So because everyone's into everyone just turns a blind eye or just follows the, what was I saying? The ship being shipped out east kind of thing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, that's interesting. And if that might move us on to sort of one of the next bit. We're talking about finding the body of Bula at the in the lake. We find that I think when he's talking to Phoebus, who I believe is the coroner, and he's talking about him, and I think they go on something, and he gives March a wink and said they've all gone east. Don't all the Jews have gone east, and it makes you that thing of so they do know. People do know. People do have an inkling. Ordinary Germans know the truth, but they sort of choose the silence because it's kind of easy to go along that way.
Yeah.
What it kind of reminds me of, so when I went to 10, 12 years ago, obviously I was in Munich, and I went to Dachau, which is obviously one of the... You've been there
I've been Dachau, yeah.
But I went with a... while I was there was a tour guide. I thought, you know what, I'll pay for a private tour. And he was an American fellow, and there was a group of 6 or 7 of us, and there were a couple of Americans on the tour, and they'd asked the question. I always remember it, we're going through, and she goes, didn't the ordinary German people know? Didn't they do something? That sort of idyllic sort of... And he goes, yeah, well, what would you... They knew, but they didn't want to know. It's always stuck with me. He's like, they knew, but they didn't want to know. He goes, think about it back home in the US. The mafia run everything. Do you want to know that? No, but you don't do anything about it, do you? And she sort of shut her mouth.
Yeah.
And that's always stuck with me. It's it's not right, but you can't do anything about it. So do you what are you going to do? Make a stand, or are you just going to get on with your life? It was. I've never heard anyone explain it so well and parallel it to what's actually going on.
Yeah. It's probably on his first thread hearing that question.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's genius.
Yeah, we've touched on it from previous episodes where people would say, "Oh, if I was back in the 1950s, I would have stood up for civil." I was like, "Oh, would you really?" Yeah, you're not one of those brave people that went down into the South and were driving around raising social issues that they were literally people trying to hijack the cars and lynch them and stuff. So yeah, it's all good and say that in hindsight, but when you're actually in that position, would you do it? Oh, I doubt it. Yeah,
I doubt it very much.
Yeah, people would. Yeah, exactly. That's always those brave few that do stand up against those evil regimes like that. So
yeah.
Another thing interesting on that too, another part without going east, was that there's one part in the book too, in this similar kind of, in this area where March is investigating his apartment, and he finds something that the old tenants in that apartment block he lives in, like an old photo or something, and he's inquisitive nature, right? He wanted to know who they were, and he takes the photo up to the landlord, and the landlord goes, "Oh yeah, we don't talk about that."
Yeah.
And then he puts 2 and 2 together. He realizes that they were Jewish, and they've just been shipped off east as well.
Yeah,
so,
and I think there's a bit later when he talks about he was obviously at sea in the war. He was in the U-boat, and he knew there was a Jewish family in his building or in his neighborhood when he left. But when he came back, they were gone. And he said he asked about. No, it never happened. It's sort of like Nibelheim in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah,
there was no fire here. What are you on about? But there's a file on him. I think you find out I think Niebuhr, who's the chief of police, I believe, it talks about a file. It shows that he's been asking questions about it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So he's everything's so tightly controlled.
Yeah, and that's the scary part, isn't it?
But I think one of Harris's aims for this book was actually, as I said before, he wanted to see what a world would look like, or how, had Nazi Germany won, how Hitler might have explained away the disappearance of 6 to 10 million Jews. And I think that's a really good talking point for now. Because when I read it 10 years ago, I was thinking of it, from a World War II perspective, and what we know now, we obviously know, probably all there is to know almost about the Holocaust and everything. You hear about it all the time. There's
Hollywood movies, documentaries.
Yeah. We know everything, and it's hard to understand how people couldn't have known.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me of that. It's a joke out of 2.5 Men, because he's watching the History Channel, and he goes, "Oh, what are you watching?" He goes, "Oh, it's Nazi week." He goes, "Oh, every week's Nazi week," because every documentary, everything's always on the Nazis.
Let's just give it a chance to see how it works.
That's what Poland said about the Germans.
Been watching History Channel again?
It's Nazi week.
It's always Nazi week.
It's everywhere. Yeah. But so go on. Sorry.
Yeah. But it's funny, in our time, and you think, nah, surely everyone would know that. But then you sort of realize, the victor does rewrite history. Well, the victor doesn't rewrite history; it erases it, doesn't it? We spoke about the other week what happened in Indonesia with Suharto, how because they were on our side in the in the Cold War, and we needed them. We more talk about Pol Pot, but we don't talk about the 500,000 to 1 million civilians that were massacred.
Yeah.
Because I guess it was all in the name of sort of fighting against communism. You know what I mean? So like that's just brushed under the carpet. We don't think about that. We sort of, I think we even go back to the Armenian genocide that the Ottoman Empire had committed in the First World War, when they needed a scapegoat, and basically they accused Armenians of sort of colluding with the Russians, and they marched bloody 1.5 million of them. I think the men were shot outright, and they marched about 1.5 million of them to their deaths, basically, saying they were going to relocate them. But still to this day, nobody talks about it, and I don't think they've actually even apologized for it or they acknowledge it. And we don't push the fact, and we never pushed the fact back in the day, because I guess Turkey was a Cold War ally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We had ICBMs placed there, and they were sort of strategically important.
Yeah.
You know, like even it brings us on to, I guess, what we were talking about, and we have talked about for a little bit, is Imperial Japan.
Yeah.
How Japan is seen. Who I mean, this is probably a really good discussion point, and dare I say it, it's going to be quite controversial, but I think Japan get away with the atrocities they committed in the Second World War because they became a victim after the atomic bombs were dropped on them.
Absolutely.
In many ways, and in fact, in a lot of ways, they were actually worse than the Nazis.
Well, some of the barbarity they got up to was it's hard listen, hard read. Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
Especially when you go into things like the rape of Nanking and other conquests of China as well. Like it was just some of it was at one point like even a Nazi official was like raising the alarm back to Hitler, saying, "Yeah, can you have a chat to the Japanese leaders, because what's going on here is just next level barbarity."
Yeah. And I guess the two regimes of, like, you know, the Nazi regime and the Japanese regime, are the actual, like, the racial ideologies and the superiority, how they were sort of one and the same. Nazis sort of went down the extermination route, where I guess the Japanese were more along the lines of, you know, slavery and dominion and
the spoils of war. Yeah,
the spoils of war. But in actual, you know, there's some estimates put their civilian casualties.
Oh, what about the because it's a massive issue still, like in South Korea, like the comfort women, like that was just, it's disgraceful. Yeah,
and Japan have not acknowledged, or very rarely.
Well, they don't teach their students about it or anything like that. Yeah, they just, I think they hear bits and pieces, but they don't. They get it's all focused on the nuclear war, or the nuclear bomb being dropped. It's more on that factor and actual, you know, addressing, like, you know, when you go to Germany, every 2 seconds you're seeing like a thing like apologizing for the Holocaust.
They cannot do enough.
That's
what I said to you. I said I'm going on the We're Sorry tour in Germany.
Yeah,
every 2 seconds there's a reminder of what they did. Their children are reminded of it in school.
Yeah, there's no hiding away. There's no shying away from it.
That comes out every year that tells them how bad they were.
Yeah,
you know, and look, rightly so. But it's disproportionate to, I guess, in Japan, who have barely acknowledged any of the war crimes they committed. I don't even think they've acknowledged the rape of Nanking.
Yeah, we'll have them apologise for it at least.
Formally. And it's
Well, I think even like I've read that I think it was like in the late 2000s, like a movie was coming out against it, and they tried to stop it being shown in Japan about the atrocities that happened in the rape of Nanking. And it just shows that I think even the political system there, like even acknowledging that it's kind of considered anti-Japanese or something, to even consider it or think about it.
Political suicide.
Yeah. It's very. Like and the reason why it was allowed to manifest that way was that, as you said, touched on earlier, was the nuclear bomb, number one, but also too that Japan became a very useful ally in the east there, in the Asian region. So they needed the Cold War. So they didn't want to make the mistakes that would happened with, you know, when Germany were defeated in 1918, where they made them punish them and made them more, you know, resentful of losing the war. So they reshaped them into more of a, you know, democratic society of you know, mold around like the Western world. So, and what's funny too is that, you know, obviously the head of government, even though the emperor was technically not really, he was more figurehead than actual in control of it. But then he kind of became but he was the face of the government. He was the head of the country.
Did he go to Disneyland or something?
Yeah, there was something. It's a funny thing where he did a tour of America and went to Disneyland, and it was funny. We're watching this video, and the guy goes, "Oh, imagine Joseph Goebbels coming to Disneyland or something like 20 years later."
But it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah, it is. It's just bizarre. Yeah.
But yeah, I think being a Cold War ally in Asia and a
vital point.
Communist, it was a base of operation used in the Korean War and in the Vietnam War.
And sort of just to Japan's credit, what they did turn it around, and like look what the country is today.
Yes.
It's a marvel society. It's one of the best in the world, and like obviously the bomb getting dropped on it was horrendous, but it's a shame that they haven't acknowledged some of their past indiscretions.
It's disproportionate to what we see in Germany. I mean, every time there's a refugee crisis or anything happens, everyone's looking at Germany like, "Come on, boys, you got to pay the debt here. You got to pay the debt," and they seemingly cannot do enough. They'll never be forgiven for it. Yeah, and rightly so. Don't get me wrong.
No, it should never.
Yeah.
But both atrocities should never be forgotten. That's the thing. Yeah,
but it seems so unequal, right?
Yeah.
But that's when we talk about this point that Harris wanted to raise. How would Hitler explain it away? It kind of 10 years ago, I thought, nah, he couldn't. 10 years on, I get a bit older and wiser, a bit more cynical. I'm like, he absolutely could. Had the Nazis won the war, he absolutely could explain away the disappearance of 6 to 10 million Jews.
It is funny because it reminds me of that quote Putin said, something about in 2014 when the Crimea thing, and the Americans were getting upset about it and the West were as well. And he kind of said, yeah, you'll be upset for maybe a year or two, but then you'll forget about it, and then we'll become numb to it, but we won't forget. We'll continue conquering and doing what we want.
Last year
we got a stronger will. This is more important to us, and you feel like that would be the case. Where you could imagine just the culture and society in America at the time with fighting the Cold War would be the point of like, oh look, we're not a fan of the Nazi regime, what they stand for, but look, it's 20 years down the track. They're established in Europe. We need to open up trade relations,
Realpolitik would come into it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I've actually got a quote here. I spoke about the Armenian genocide a little bit earlier. This is actual quote from Hitler, the Ober-Salzburg speech. So this speech was given to Wehrmacht commanders on the 22nd of August 1939, days before the invasion of Poland, which, as we know, was the trigger event for the Second World War. Our strength consists in our speed and in our brutality. Genghis Khan led millions of women and children to slaughter. With premeditation and a happy heart, history sees him solely the founder of a state. It's a matter of indifference to me what a weak Western European civilization will say about me. I have issued the command, and I'll have anybody who utters but one word of criticism executed by a firing squad, that our war aim does not consist in reaching certain lines, but in the physical destruction of the enemy. Accordingly, I have placed my death head formations in readiness, for the present only in the east, with orders to them to send to death mercilessly and without compassion men, women, and children of Polish derivation and language. Only thus shall we gain the living space which we need. Who, after all, speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?
Yeah,
and I thought that's like that sums it up.
Yeah,
because still to this day, nobody acknowledged that. They talk about it in Armenia, but what the Ottoman Empire did, but nobody acknowledges it, even then. And even now, even right now, it's never really been acknowledged. Yeah. And it just shows how history can, depending on the victor.
Well, we're seeing it in real time at the moment.
Yeah.
With some of the conflicts going on at the moment. So,
yes.
Yeah. So, no, it's still relevant as it is back then, it is today. So, it's crazy how just whoever controls the information controls the outcome and what people think in the minds. Yeah. So, what could be true one day is false the next day, or vice versa.
It was always this way, brother.
Yeah, it always was. Yeah, don't question it. So back to the timeline. So, we were saying too that, establishing March's character. March is, he's a cynical kind of guy. He's just going through the motions. He's in his early 40s now. Like he's 20 years removed from the war.
Yeah.
He doesn't trust. He's just very, he's not trusted. But his colleagues don't really trust him because he's not. Because he, as I said, following lines, and
he doesn't seem to do any extracurricular activities and all that sort of stuff.
He does the bare minimum basically.
He goes through the motions like that. What's it in Office Space? He doesn't show his flair or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, but I'm doing the job, but.
Like Jennifer Aniston's character, you don't have to wear the 16 stars on the jacket, but
you should want to.
Yeah, but you said the minimum's 12. It's like
Let me ask you a question, Joanna. What do you think of a person who only does the bare minimum?
What do I think? You know what, Stan? If you want me to wear 37 pieces of flair like your pretty boy over there, Brian, why don't you just make the minimum 37 pieces of flair?
We're talking about Nazi Germany and adding an Office Space, but anyway.
There we go, Well, there's Office Space and there's Living Space, so... Somehow links. But basically, the first part is establishing that the whole society is controlled by the Nazi regime, and especially the Gestapo. They wire everything, they tap everything, everything's recorded. nothing goes untapped, unchecked. So if you want to be discreet, you gotta think of things like you gotta play 4D chess basically to get to beat them. So basically, when Marsh is investigating, he's noticing little patterns here and there with Bueller's death. Is like, oh, that's weird. That they said he drowned, but then it looks like it could have been strangled or something like that. And he found there was a jogger, a cadet jogger going around who discovered the body, and he made a comment to March saying, "Oh, I also saw another person there, a couple of officials as well." And then that gets the ball rolling with March thinking, that's a bit odd. Why would an official be there? And then he starts to discover that was it they were trying to dismiss it, going, he was drunk and he must have fallen asleep into the water and drowned or something. But then we find out, he actually didn't drink, so that doesn't make sense. And then all these little things start to unravel where it's looking like it's not, maybe it wasn't a natural death. It was there was unmitigating circumstances behind it. Interesting enough, that cadet I just had talked about before identifies a guy called Globus, and he was the one that left the scene, the last one seen with Bueller. And in doing so, a couple of days after, that kid ends up getting he disappears as well. So we don't know what happens to him. So
he gets sent off to the Eastern Front.
It's reassigned basically. Yeah, for re-education camp somewhere else. Yeah, fun happy camp as they say. Yeah. So then and being, I guess we'll touch on too. March has a detective partner called Max Jaeger. And Jaeger's just your typical knockabout kind of guy and bureaucratic. Yeah. He follows the scene. He's cynical as well, but then he still just goes with it. So, and he was the one that was meant to take the call that day, but then he didn't. They're kind of saying to him and to both of them, look, don't worry about the investigation. The Gestapo's going to take it over, and just go back to your daily business. Where if Max Jaeger was the one solely focusing on it, he would have just done that. Where old March, he can't let it go. It's too intriguing. He has to find out what it was, and
there's too many inadequacies.
It doesn't make sense to him, and that's when he goes through Bueller's house and discovers things. And there's a real cruel scene too at the end of part 1 too, where he goes to the house and he just escapes in time when the others are investigating it. When the Globus turns up, Bueller's dog's there, and then they just execute the dog. And I was like, oh, I was just trying to cover all tracks, that.
If there's any way, and there's been a lot of. Seems to be a lot of dead dogs in this podcast that we speak about. But if there's any way to show that you're a fucking fuckwit, an absolute fuckwit, it's by executing a dog.
Absolutely, yeah. After that, like kind of March kind of then discovers that Bueller's like not only was he a senior Nazi figure to die recently, there's been a couple of other ones that have either been resettled elsewhere or they've mysteriously had a heart attack.
They've tripped down the stairs.
Very, very tragic how these happens. Very clumsy of them. So this sets out and when he starts to investigate it further, and it goes back to another death, wasn't it? I believe when he meets Charlie for the first time.
Stuttgart, I think.
Stuttgart, that's right. Yeah. March meets Charlotte Maguire, aka Charlie, and she's an American journalist, so she's a very key figure in the novel too. And she's there as an American journalist covering Hitler's 75th birthday. We find out too that she's got German heritage, so she's both can speak German and English, obviously. Her mother was a famous actress or something in Germany. That's why she had connections there. So
it's funny when we get into Charlie a little bit later and how integral she is to the story. She mentions that like she'd been given a list of contacts by her parents.
Yeah,
and everyone she goes to find is all mysteriously disappeared or dead.
Yeah,
and then it starts sort of uncovering further and further and further until you get to the point where you find out that it wasn't just these 4 people who'd been murdered. It's all the people, I think 14 or 15 people that had attended the Wannsee conference.
Yeah,
which was the conference that would kind of put in motion the I guess the final solution that we know in our timeline when the bureaucratic, the coldness and the systematic approach that we sort of know now of like, the building of the death camps and how many people we're going to fit into a train and but it was all done and by a fella. It's all run by Heydrich, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was the mastermind of that. That conference, and in this timeline too, to state, he's not assassinated by the Czech separatists. In this, he survived it, and he's still thriving.
It's an interesting story. That you told me about a book you read on that one, didn't you?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely. That is the assassination of him is enthralling. Like it was, it's one of those ones where people touch on like, oh, he died.
You see it in a documentary. It's like a side note.
We actually go into it, and then the training behind it, and the saddest thing of all is that the people that assassinated him, because he obviously died of from the poisoning of the bullet.
Died in hospital.
Hospital. That's what killed. And it was a couple of days later. But they died in a church, hunted down by the Gestapo, thinking that they failed. When in reality, then obviously later on, he obviously died in hospital, as we just touched on. So it was kind of sad in that way that they thought that they failed their training and failed their people. But no, they actually. But the whole fiasco of that assassination attempt is like they stuffed up the bombing, so they had to shoot him, and it all went haywire.
Yeah.
Like, it did not go to plan at all.
Everything that could go wrong did go wrong.
Exactly.
So in this world, he survives that assassination attempt. The assassination attempt happened, but he survives it, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. Yeah. And then he's the puppet master basically of everything, and we're finding too. Then Globus keeps on popping up everywhere for some reason. We don't know why, but he is. The way Robert Harris keeps you intrigued about it. You know something's going on bad, but you can't put your finger on what they're uncovering and what they're trying to head towards. And another pivotal point too is because Charlie's an American, she's like. She doesn't follow. She's not grown up in this. She's not been brainwashed by the bureaucracy of it all and the society. So she's inquisitive. She wants to know as well. She's a bit like March as well. Like she's on another level compared to him because he still doesn't think of outside the Reich box, does he? Where she does.
Yeah, like he tries to, and you get the inkling that like he almost doesn't want to, but like he's aware, because obviously we know he's morally he's got a conscience because, as you say, he asks about the Jewish family. He's inquisitive. He doesn't take things at face value, but you get the feeling he doesn't want to. He's asking, but he doesn't want to know the answer. You know what I mean? Like that's why I really like Charlie's character in the book a lot more than I did. Not that I didn't like it 10 years ago. I didn't think of her as much as I do now. Like I really appreciate their relationship, and I think that all culminates. Like I think one of my favorite scenes in the book is like the actual when they both go to Zurich together. When they follow the trail. In search of the documents from the Wannsee conference, because what they find out is that, the 14 or 15 people that were at that conference had all been sort of over the last decade. There'd be one that died every year, but they'd space them apart so it didn't look suspicious. So you find out, you start, oh shit, so someone's been picking them off, and they sort of follow. I guess it's Luther or the breadcrumbs to take them to Zurich.
Yeah,
but I love how like that whole scene of them having dinner together. And talking about like
before we get to like that Zurich part is that it establishes that the Nazi regime, like the Gestapo, think that they were smuggling art to Zurich or other money or whatever it was, but actually what they were doing, they were securing, they were playing both sides. They're thinking if all goes pear shaped, I can use this as proof of what was going on, or if someone's trying to come after me or come after us, then we can use this to get escape out of. Go to the US or something like that, or escape to another part of the world, and use this as evidence to bring down the regime. So it's like their insurance policy. So
it's very clever, isn't it?
Yeah, but then we don't know this at the stage what it was. We assume it's something horrendous, but
it's very late, and it's all like, and this whole thing because of the visit of, I suppose we haven't even got onto the visit of Joseph Kennedy now. Like you think it's going to be
well, they talk about President Kennedy's coming, and you're thinking, oh, who else? Well, JFK. Oh, maybe he survived the assassination attempt. Who knows? But then no, it's not JFK. It's his father, Joseph Kennedy. Yeah, the old bootlegger from the 1920s.
Yeah. And this opens. This is interesting because we know in our timeline that Joseph Kennedy was the ambassador to the UK during the Second World War, wasn't he? And he was a known. He didn't have a lot of affinity for the UK, obviously because of his Irish heritage and everything. And he also I guess he sort of pursued for. He thought the British should actually pursue for peace with Hitler. I think he had a reputation. By the British as like seen as a defeatist purely because during the Brits he actually evacuated his family to London to the countryside. So they seen him. I think Randolph Churchill, funnily enough, so Churchill's son said, "I thought my daffodils were yellow until I met Joe Kennedy." So it's like, but interesting. As I say, he supported appeasement towards Nazi Germany. He had actually tried on several occasions. Unsuccessfully to arrange personal meetings with Hitler to improve sort of US-German relations, even against like State Department policy. But his thinking was, I better get in here and just better have a sort of communication line here in case, because whatever's going to happen is going to happen, So
the circumstances change.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. That they use Joseph Kennedy as the president at the time in this timeline. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, because of the appeasement thing. I mean, I guess historians and contemporaries have accused him of sort of anti-Semitic views. I mean, there's a few quotes that I've got here. He's sort of like, what did he say? He said to Charles Lindbergh in 1940. Charles Lindbergh actually gets a mention at one point.
He was an anti-Semite too.
Yeah, but he gets a mention as working for the government or something, or they mention Lindbergh, Senator Lindbergh or something.
That's right. Yeah.
They do, and almost certainly it's him. But supposedly Kennedy had said to Charles Lindbergh in 1940, it is not the German per se, but the Jewish influence in this country that is pushing us into war. And then he supposedly said to US diplomats in 1938 to 1939, Jewish persecution in Germany is not entirely unjustified. The Jews brought it on themselves by being so prominent in business, finance, and the professions. So it's like, this is allegedly, you know what I mean? But he's picked up saying this sort of stuff. But it as you say, it makes sense why they would. It's interesting to have some sort of appeaser in this world, at like what the relation would look like between the two.
No, interesting. Yeah, no, there is a lot. Like, there's another. I wouldn't say it's the same vein as this kind of alternative history as Fatherland or Man in the High Castle and stuff. But there was the Plot Against America, and the key figure in that one too was Charles Lindbergh, was the one that was pushing for relations with Germany in 1940s, eliminating making Jewish people second-class citizens within America. Like, he's the figurehead of it. So it makes sense why Charles Lindbergh's referenced in both that book and this one as well. So, but we get to that point too, where we find out that one of the other key figures, Martin Luther, he's missing at the moment, so we don't know if he's dead or alive, because all the others have all died off. It's very suspiciously, we touched on earlier. Sorry, very tragically. Sorry, yeah. And they track his movements to. He was for some reason he went to Zurich, and then he came. And they don't know if he came back or not, or they would have been. I think they would have been officials. I can't remember exactly from the book, but then we find out from Niebuhr, the head of the police of the Reich, is he kind of is. He doesn't like the Gestapo as well. They're all playing politics with each other, so he's trying to kill two birds with one stone by letting March go down this path where they've been told that the Gestapo's looking into this, but it could benefit him politically down the track.
Yeah, I like Niebuhr's character, because you don't know, he's kind of got that like uncle-y sort of father figure where he's sort of arm around the shoulder March, but equally, he's got his own sort of agenda in it too. Yeah.
Or he's the typical trope of the good cop, bad cop routine or something, where on one hand you got the Globus part of it, but then he's like, oh no, I got your back, mate. Go for it.
He's not showing his hand, is he?
Yeah, exactly. He keeps his card close to his chest. So basically, March tells Charlie that he's heading to Zurich, and he told her it's too dangerous. Don't follow me. Basically, then she sneaks on board, and she buys him a bottle of scotch or something, a whiskey.
Bottle of Glenfiddich to his room, and then it kind of like this like appeasement between the two, and that's why I say it takes us onto that scene at dinner, which I kind of like where it's that point where like he's sort of pissed off at her for following him. He told her not to. And then they kind of get to the point like, no, we can work together here. And then he sort of, we talked about March sort of not knowing but not wanting to know, but he's like, tell me what are they saying in America? And she tells him of like, they tells him of like, no, well, this is what's happening in the East. Oh, they say we're winning the war in the East. No, 100,000 men have died since, I don't know, last year or the year before or something. So they bring the bodies back at night. So not all is well when this like the Labour's around and in the East as Goebbels is saying it is. Yeah. There's I guess what happened to the Jews. Well, they say this happened, but people assume people escaped. People have told people. They say there were camps and people got out and are telling what I mean. And he's kind of, it's like that whole thing of like. It's a weird control of information, isn't it? We think of China in our timeline, how they stop Google and they control all information, and we would know, people don't even know about Tiananmen Square massacre or anything like that. You know what I mean? It's like she's 15 years younger than him, but knows more about the world than he does.
Yeah, because he's so isolated in that bubble. Yeah. And then it's kind of, we just touched on with China too, like with the way they do things as well. Like the TikTok that we know is about doing stupid dances and songs and stuff like that, where the TikTok in China is about, oh no, we want to be astronauts and doctors and lawyers when we grow up kind of thing. Yeah,
it's dumbing us all down.
Dumbing us down, yes. Talk about playing 3D chess. But it's at that point too that it was like 3 or 4 figures that had control of the vault in Zurich, where these whoever was in the vault, we don't know at this stage what it is, and they have a log of like who's checked in. Like no one checked in for the last 20 years, I think it was, until Luther came a couple of days before. Yeah, because he had Stuttgart's key, and that gave him access to it. And I love the bank teller. That's the Swiss bank teller, like so bloody neutral. Won't say plays both sides. You know, typical Swiss man. You know, like he'll take money from good and evil, doesn't give a shit. And stays out of it. But he gives like a translog of what like basically who signed in, signed out kind of thing. But he can't go into like why he came in, what he said, that kind of thing. But when he's in there, that's when he it's empty, isn't it? When I go in there.
No, there's some artwork. Leonardo. So he finds Leonardo da Vinci's portrait of Cecilia Gallerani, which was obviously stolen from, I think, Poland or whatever it was, supposedly, which it actually was. Yeah. It was actually returned to Poland after the war, but in this timeline, obviously...
They kept the spoils of war. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's kind of like, he leaves a bit... Nothing really answered the question, did they? Yeah, it was kind of a bit... didn't tick the box.
But obviously something's been taken out of there, so there was...
That's the whole point, because that was... Yeah, Luther's been in there and taken something, and they want to know exactly what it is. This is the point, too, where Charlie and Xavier kind of like cement their relationship, you know? They have a lovely relationship after that, don't they?
They do.
Get to know each other a little bit more close and personal. Yeah, which is nice, but...
And then this is, when they fly back to Berlin. So obviously, what's kind of clever is they realize, so they fly back to Berlin and realize, you know, it's just, security is on like ultra high alert because, as we established earlier, you know, it's the Fuhrer's birthday, the week off, but at this time there's a state visit of Joseph Kennedy. So I guess it's kind of reflected that like everything appears to be going well on the surface, but if Germany doesn't get this sort of, would you call it a truce? Would you call it like this appeasement?
Easing of tensions.
This easing of tensions between the two, and they don't cement some sort of financial relationship. Germany's in a lot of trouble. So everything kind of hinges on this relationship with the US and Germany going well. Hence why anyone tied to the Wannsee conference or the final solution has been sort of, hence why the killings have kind of upped in the last, why 4 people have died in the last 6 months kind of thing. Yeah. To sort of, because that cannot get out.
And also too, we've seen that the Americans are like, who are in there, so like people from the embassy and Charlie, so they're not really messed with too much because they don't want any issues being related or raised or negative press in that regard. That could derail this kind of agreement coming up.
Yeah, everything sort of hinges on it. Yeah. But you see, like, I guess, it's just security is on high alert, so they're checking every single case, and that's where they get there. And I think they go out, but they go out and they do a thing, and they do some stuff, and the story goes on a little bit more. But I think what happens later is then they realize he must have brought something back, but he would never have got his case. He would have ditched it. Yeah, and they go back, and I guess they have that light bulb moment, which is kind of cool as well.
That's right. He checked. Is right. We find out later that he checks it into that in the area, wasn't? Oh, the lost and found. That's right. Yeah. And by hunch, March goes back to the airport and goes to the guy. Oh, by any chance, was it a leather bag or something left? And that's when he gets the eureka moment and finds it. And because he grabs it, takes it back home, and he gets the knife or something to try and play around with it. And I think Charlie's with him as well, right? When they're doing it. And that's when it's like the big reveal happens when they tell us like all the numbers and the train timelines, and there's the photos as well.
Photos, I guess the chat and the reason why they use Zyklon B, because I guess earlier in the war, Operation Barbarossa really is when it started. I guess the whole in our timeline, the whole concept of the Holocaust, right? Like the whole, back in those days, they were just executing them by firing squad. Like as part of Operation Barbarossa, there was in Babi Yar, which is a Ukrainian village. So on the 29th of September in 1941, more than 33,000 Jewish people were murdered, and they were shot by firing squad. So I think to this day, it's the most people were massacred by a firing squad. But I think they got to the point so that this racial ideology and this I guess ethnic cleansing, it was always going on, but it wasn't going on in the industrial scale that we sort of know, with Zyklon B and the gas chambers. That kind of came after, because what came out of that, the Germans, for example, said, we haven't got 11 million bullets to spare, essentially, so we need to find a new way, and this was kind of born out of that. And I think I also mentioned there's something so written by Heinrich of sort of saying like, oh, we're the victims, the men who have to do the shootings, they have like, though, what's the word? Like they emotionally break down, sort of thing. Which of course you would, but it was that was why this was used, because it was this is where they introduced at the Wannsee conference those degrees of separation, and this is where they really planned the the systemic process of it. Like this was the conference that kind of did that, yeah. And this is with the documents that he finds.
Yeah, and that's when, because obviously we know what that document represents, but you can imagine, because I think even Charlie's just like blown away, because they always heard the rumors and innuendos and the storytelling, but actually seeing it printed in on file, like, and the pure like industrial scale of it. It's just it would be it's a very eye opening.
What's interesting in the book that it's a good bloody 10 pages or so that it's dedicated to it, and it's written in this sort of, dare I say, it sort of disrupts the flow of the book, and it's presented in
But it's very matter of fact.
almost benign, boring, factual.
Statistics,
and that's done with good reason.
On purpose,
it's done to show that, as I said, that banality of evil, just how all these like atrocities and massacres could just be boiled down to some sort of 90-minute conference.
Yeah.
You know, everyone's sitting in a room and looking at a PowerPoint presentation or something.
Well, there's a quote from the book, and it's like both his like realization of this, and then also like the cover-ups going on. He goes, the quote is, "It was not the crime itself that shocked him, but the response to it, the endless cover-up, the secrecy, the lies."
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing, isn't it? Yeah, that circle of that. It's not like what like the actual event itself was, you know, obviously horrific, but it's also to the fact that they're covering their tracks and denying it ever happened.
It makes a point of like doing a double take on it, where it talks about, you know, he was obviously at sea in the U-boat, so I suppose he could have been like, I guess he supposedly could have plausible deniability. Essentially, if you're fighting in the Atlantic War and you wouldn't have known what was going on. But obviously, as we know, he's probably got an inkling, but he doesn't want to know. But he reads the bit where I guess the you know, the industrial scale of like, you know, where it goes to the point where they're sort of taking the bodies, they're gassing them. All right, they're coming in, they're moving them over to like a conveyor belt. You've got like dentists on each side pulling teeth out. You've got people with razors cutting their hair off, and it's all like that side. All right, hair will be, you know, this will be melted down to gold. Hair will be made into socks and it'll be given to
the fighting
to people on the U-boats. And he reads it twice.
That's right. Yeah.
And he's like, and at that point, it kind of like
hits home.
I was complicit. Like even like it's hit home. It's that little thing that like, shit, I wasn't separate from this. You know, like unknowingly, and it's very clever in that sense.
Yeah, another interesting quote from the book that I remember reading was like, I wrote down, it was like, "The truth was like ice, smooth and whole on the surface, but beneath it was cracked and treacherous."
Yeah.
So it's just that whole thing about the underlying fragility and and the danger of uncovering the hidden truth of what this you know, this society and this government was built on. You know, the lies and the slaughter of millions of people.
Well, yeah, and that's like what Robert Harris set out to achieve, wasn't it? Like you have the truth. You have the truth here, but you have to have the political will to kind of push and would it suit the time? Would it suit the relationship between the two? You know, as we spoke about, I guess, the Japanese war crimes and everything, that like, would it suit the narrative at the time for what you need, or is it going to sort of get in the way of finance or something down the line?
Exactly. And at this point too, March, he discovered the whole truth. He has two options. Does he just accept it for what it is, or is he going to change something different about it? And there's another quote from the book I'll mention too that kind of comes to that kind of conundrum he has. He goes, "You can't change the world, but you can make it a little less terrible," which is an interesting. But like, it's like, maybe you can't take down the regime, you can't do that, but you can make little indents here and there that can, you know, have that flow-on effect that can maybe eventually inspire someone else to do this and that, and then make the change that way. So, and that, I think we've established too that March then does decide that he wants to get this out and release this kind of thing. So that's when he makes him and Charlie make it their mission to try and find Luther, right? So, and then Luther's hiding with the homeless people at the train station, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He was undercover. He was trying to think of all like kind of where was the least likely place he'd hide or where, because it's established too that Luther is a guy that likes to find the things in life and likes his red wines and luxury and stuff. But then now he's living as a homeless person amongst there, and they try and trick the Gestapo by putting a homeless man getting run over by a train or something, because apparently it happens all the time where they'll sleep somewhere underneath the locomotive and then it runs them over.
Yeah.
And he puts like his
passport,
and then they assume that's him. But then he reaches out to Charlie, and they make an arrangement via a telephone call. And they use a phone booth for some reason, you know, because they wouldn't want any trace of it, because it's almost impossible to, you know, pinpoint, you know, when they've been talking to who and where and stuff. And obviously in the background too, March is telling Max about all that's going on and stuff. So that's important for down the track. And they're planning to meet, and because Luther's very distrustful of everything, and he goes, "I'll only meet you in a public place at this point in time, and we'll have to walk and cross paths here and there." And when that happens, they're about to meet and cross paths, and Charlie was about to meet him, and I think Xavier's in the car, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's the driver, and out of nowhere, his head just gets blown off Luther's, and then they just run. It was Charlie and the ambassador, wasn't it? I think from memory.
Charlie and someone, he's from the embassy.
Nightingale. Nightingale,
Yeah.
that's it, yep. So they both, they go on that mad chase in the car and they get away, and then I think they realize, like, how the hell did it get ployed? How did they find out? They must have, did you rat us out?
Who accuses the embassy?
You ratted us out, blah, blah, blah. And then they basically go into hiding, and they're wanted people now, and the whole Reich knows about it too.
Yeah.
The Gestapo. Yeah, so no, it's definitely like it's at that point too. When I was talking about earlier with this book, like you're thinking, okay, yeah, Luther's gonna give him they're gonna figure out a way to smuggle him out, and do this and that, and out of nowhere he gets his head blown off. He's like, whoa, what's going on here? Like,
yeah, and you'll think, who told him? Oh, maybe the phone booth must have been tapped or something. They must have gone into him.
Or someone's betrayed the embassy. Someone at the embassy betrayed them, or maybe someone said something and they figured it out, or maybe the Gestapo's been playing them the whole time or something. Yeah, you don't know. So it's crazy like that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I suppose that's the bit where they make the choice now that we have to cross the border, and I think they decide to cross it into the Swiss border, don't they? And they're coming up with sort of, they're making themselves alter egos, and
he's basically, because obviously he's trained in like police, like tactics and undercover stuff. So he's saying to her, like, your name is blah blah blah. Practice it. Say it 3-4 times. Where are you from? What's this? Like every kind of question that he knows they would ask her.
And what I like the detail, obviously, it's the Führer's birthday, and like he hasn't been seen in 6 months or something, and like he's making a visit, he's meeting the US president, and everybody's going to be watching it on the TV, and he to the moment he goes, the moment if anyone was going to be sort of not have the concentration, you cross the border at that exact time. That's the time you got to cross. It's all really, really well thought out.
Yeah,
and like we get that point where he's going to meet her at a hotel, and they're going to go, and I think it's on the Swiss border or something.
Yeah, it's kind of, wasn't it times that? Yeah, that's right. So,
and they go there, and they go at separate times, which is actually quite clever, because she goes alone. It's safer for them to travel separately.
Yeah,
and he makes that choice to go on.
He basically says to her, if I'm not here by, I think it's like 8:30 or something, you go. Don't worry about me. I'll meet. If I am fine, I'll meet you at a later date, or if I'm not, I've been held. But the most important thing is you get out with those documents.
Yeah.
That's the most key part of it. Yeah.
And I guess it's that point where he goes to say goodbye to his son, and you sort of know now that, like, oh, fuck.
Yeah. So like, because last time he talked to Pilly said, "I hate you," wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he slapped him across the face or something, I think.
Yeah.
And he's still that fatherly instinct. He still wants to have a relationship with his son, or he goes to meet his son and tells his son, like, you're going to hear bad things about me. Don't believe them. I've always trusted and loved you, kind of thing. And then, next thing you know, out of nowhere,
the coldness of his son, he's trying to keep his dad there. Oh, read this book with me, Dad. Do all this, and you find out the Gestapo have got to his son, and his son's thinking he's being a good citizen, right? And he keeps his dad there. Oh no, they said you're sick, Dad. They're going to fix you.
Globus comes in, right?
Yeah. They window, and it's like, he's caught, and it kind of like reminds me of thinking about the interrogation scene when they throw him in the room and it's all grey and everything. I see it very much as I see in 1984 when I see Winston being thrown in the room, waiting to go into room 101, and he's just sort of sitting like his fate, like, and the way they're questioning him, and they read his file, like, his whole discussion verbatim, like everything, and it's just like, oh fuck, how do they know?
How do they tap the phone that they were on? He still couldn't figure it out, and this is where we find that Globus is doing the old bad cop routine, like beating the crap out of him, but then doing it, they do it in a way as well where they'll beat him to a pulp and almost to his breaking point, but then give him respite a bit, give him a cigarette, or give him there's they're playing those mind games with him, and that's when
because they want to know where they're onto it now, because I think he's revealed the final solution. He knows what's going on, because I think he's talking to like an ex-colleague Krebs or something, and he's talking to him, and he says he knows what went on, and then I think they know that, like, shit.
That's right too. And then March, he had to go back to the library, wasn't it? And to find out some date. And because he had to give his name in at that point in time, because everything's recorded, he took that risk knowing, if I do check this book out, they're going to know I'm investigating exactly what the final solution is. So that was another giveaway too. Because then that guy at the library ratted him out as well. So
Vance, that was way. But that's that point where they know that it's not him, but he has to get. They know that what's her name, Charlie's on her way. She's got the documents, and it's clever how like they seemingly like they're taking him to another location, and then they stage that sort of like an escape. And they make it look like Krebs is like, oh, he's pissing himself. Get him out the car. They give him a gun, and then they meet Neba in a building, and then Neba's like, oh no, you have to go and expose the truth. And it makes you feel, oh, actually, maybe there is a happy ending. Like,
or made you think, oh, like maybe they were in it the whole time, and they're going to get him out. Like, he's had a change of mind or something.
And then he gets into a car with and Jaeger's there, and it's like I think it's a nice sort of Mercedes with a full tank and everything. And you think, oh shit, maybe it's going to be Max and Jaeger. They're going to get there, you know.
Yeah.
And then it dawns on you that like, and I think it dawns on March. He's like,
March knows. That's when he saw him, Max in the car.
Yeah,
he knew.
It's too perfect.
He said he knew at that point. He knew that Jaeger was behind the betrayal the whole time.
Yeah,
so,
it's too perfect. Yeah.
I think the point to when he goes, so when did you decide to betray me or something like that? And then Jaeger looks a bit confused, and then he points the gun at him.
Yeah.
And that's at this point too when he makes him drive. Was it to one of the Holocaust?
He makes him drive to Auschwitz.
Auschwitz, that's right. Yeah.
But the clever thing, so he at this point, because they think, right, he's going to say to Jaeger, let's go. This is where we got to go, and he's going to take the Gestapo to Charlie.
Charlie, yeah.
Where he knows what they're doing, and he takes them
complete opposite direction. Yeah.
And it's cool where he essentially, as we know, he takes him to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And he walks towards Auschwitz. I think he handcuffs Jaeger to the car. But you sort of feel sorry for Jaeger because they would have got hit to him early and his family's in danger. So he's kind of only doing what he has to do as well.
Yeah.
But it's clever, like, because you like this relationship between the two of them. You're like, oh, fuck.
But that's when we find out that Max was the one who told the Gestapo to tap that phone booth because he was telling him about that meeting with Luther. That's how Luther gets assassinated from that. Because you're thinking like how
it's like so innocuous.
But you want to know like how did they find out? Like, because you know that there's spies everywhere, but like there must have been someone that betrayed them, and then you find out all along was Max. And you don't really see it coming until that point when. Yeah, when March drops that line, you're like, oh shit,
and he's so likable. It's like that, like I guess that detective trope. You know, I spoke about like you think about the Wire, you think about like McNulty and Bunk.
Yeah,
there's partners code. You think of like in True Detective. You think of like that whole like that sacred bond of you just cover for one another. And there's little bits where like I think he gives him some money and he goes, hold on to this and give this to Pilly when he's old enough. And he goes, I know you'll do right by me, Max, no matter what you are, even though he's a bit of a lazy prick and he sort of doesn't do his job, but like, March will cover for him or he'll cover for March. There's that kind of, there's that brotherly, they have a beer and they're...
Or Max is always trying to set him up with a woman or something like that as well. And
but there's that, they're having a beer and there just seems to be this nice bond between the two.
Yeah.
And it's that little innocuous, like, fuck, but he would, what I mean? Like that would happen. But we get to this point where the, and then he walks towards he sees the Gestapo coming, he walks towards... He's finding the coordinates, and it's like he has to. I guess he's seen the evidence, but until he says something tangible, he can't face it. I kind of find it almost like with the socks that he wore on the U-boat. Like he knows in some way he was complicit, but he could separate himself from it until he read that thing about the socks. He's like, no, I absolutely was. I guess he has to know that, because it's established that all the death camps they've all been demolished.
There's they never existed.
But he finds a brick. He finds a red brick, and it's almost like it's enough for him.
Yeah, and it's at this point too. He's saying to himself like, the sun's out. I know Charlie's made it. Like,
and it makes a point in the books that she's crossed. She's crossed.
He's kind of like saying like he's imagining in his head. Oh yeah, she's at the border now, and because the guard was so infatuated by seeing Hitler speak, he wanted to move her on quickly so she could get through faster. Yeah. And then she's probably at the hotel now doing this and that kind of thing. Yeah, and he just. It kind of doesn't like say that she definitely made it because it's left ambiguous, but then it's like he in his heart and soul believes that she's done, she's made it and it's going to get exposed.
Yeah, and he almost touches a brick knowing that this did happen. Yeah, it was a camp.
I'm not going mad.
Yeah, and he sort of, I guess he picks up his Luger and he walks towards the oncoming Gestapo, and I guess the book ends there, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's one of those ones where you're thinking he's going to go out in a blaze of glory or something. Like there'll be like 5 or 6 Gestapo guys with their machine guns, and he's just suicide by cop.
He's not going to. He's going to go down fighting basically. Yeah. It's. I really like the ending, and I know the whole ambiguity thing is sort of a bit of a cliche these days. You know what I mean? But in this instance, I like the fact that, and this is one of the things that pissed me off about the film. If I could say, I don't really speak about the film, but the way the film ends, where like it shows like Kennedy coming to meet Hitler, and it's all glorious and it's all happening, and the car's approaching, and then like bloody Charlie, and it's not Nightingale, but it's the guy who's meant to be Nightingale, but he's called something else in the film.
Yeah,
he rushes out. Oh, Mr. President, you have to see these documents. Oh, and then the president, my God.
Yeah.
My God. This really happened? You're like, number one, how the fuck did he rush out in a parade when, like, so he obviously would have been put down by the Gestapo, he would have been put down by the Secret Service, or tackled at the very least.
Yeah.
It's like, and then the president's seeing these documents. All right, fine, there's pictures and everything, but surely he's going to look at it and think,
oh, are these real? Are they doctored?
I'm going to have to get some second opinion on this. Like,
But also, too, like, the documents are so big and vast, you're not going to read it for 2 seconds and go, oh, yeah, what does 6 million mean there? Oh, yeah. That clearly means the concentration camps, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
My God. It's just that whole, like, oh, for fuck's sake. It was, like, so simple, you know?
Oh, that Hollywood trope,
Yeah. Whereas the ending of this is almost perfect in the sense of, like, you sort of know what his fate's going to be, but you don't know. She gets over the border.
We assume,
but then you don't know, what does this mean now in this world? How does it affect the actual relationship between the US and Nazi Germany, as we've discussed before? Because this truth comes out, what happens now? Is there the political will to actually do anything about it, or do they see for the greater good we all need to join together? Like, it's I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we've seen it before in our timeline where, you know, look at the US, for example, when, you know, Edward Snowden and Julian Assange leaked that stuff coming out and exposed a lot of war crimes that were going on, or, like, you know, like spying on, you know, US citizens. And did it really change anything? Like, it got exposed, but then they got ostracized for it. Would Charlie then become what Edward Snowden and Assange became? Like, you know, that's how I view it. I think it'd go down that path. And because it was, even though it was more focused on the Nazi regime, but it would have been also in the best interest for the American regime to open up trade relations with not only the Nazi regime and controlling Europe, but then the whole greater world too. So, you know, all the countries within that Nazi regime, you know, your Englands and Frances and stuff. So I think, it would, I think, especially Joseph Kennedy would have been like, we need to shut this down.
Yeah, especially Joseph Kennedy.
But then the whole point is that, that quote I touched on before, it says, you know, you can't change the world, but you can make it a little less terrible. So getting that book, getting that story out there, can that maybe just change something a little bit slick? At least put some doubts or perspective into the people's hearts and minds about it, about the regime, and make people think twice about doing dealings and building a relationship with the Nazi regime. So,
there is that, and I think like the book we spoke about, you know, Harris's key aims, you know, was to explore as how Hitler might have explained away the disappearance of 6 to 10 million Jews, which I think he does really well. You know, how ordinary Germans might have reacted to living in Lebensraum, which he does extremely well, which we mentioned. But whether Hitler, after the dust settled, would have been treated like Mao or Stalin, you know, who were just dictators recognized as a Cold War power. That's all they are. Yeah, I guess in the end, like the reality of it, when you talk about how the world would see Hitler had he won the war, I think that the ending does a really good job of actually exploring that without even exploring it. In the sense, like, look at like Nixon opening up with talks with China in the 70s, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, both Mao and Nixon saw it as an opportunity to, like, you know, pull leverage, like them coming together, like takes like the leverage off the Soviet Union, like China's dependency on the Soviet Union, and also they could use China as a bargaining chip against the Soviet Union as well. Like, from America's perspective, you know, back in the 1960s too, there was the Soviet, split between both powers. So they were, even though they were both communists, but they didn't trust each other and they didn't like each other as well. So you can see, I
guess the US was using it as an opportunity to exploit that, right?
Back to what we were saying before, an enemy of my enemy is my friend. So it's like that kind of thing.
And the estimated total deaths under Mao's rule, estimates are between 40 and 60 million, whether that be famine, executions, persecution, or forced labor. Do you think he was pressing that, or he went in and, don't worry about all that?
Yeah.
That's why in this world it's so easy to believe that the Holocaust could just be brushed under the carpet.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, I find it. It's just this Cold War, just knowing a little bit more about the Cold War. I find it so interesting.
And and we've touched on too. This is what Robert Harris found terrifying. Like, going through, reflecting on this, like, imagine if this went down this path, like, and then what we know now about the Holocaust was just kind of just, you know, lost to the sands of time, and just it never kind of happened, or maybe a little something here or there happened, but not on the scale. That's ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense, kind of thing. So,
that would happen. That would happen. Who would be that evil?
Who would believe that? And that's what's quoted throughout the book. Even when they discover the truth, it's kind of like, you can say it, but no one's going to believe you.
Would anyone?
Why would you believe it? Yeah, and that encapsulated it perfectly, doesn't it?
You know what's funny? I think we've had this discussion before. Like, remember when we were place we used to work, and it was full. It was a lot of like inner city lefties used to work there, And
that's an understatement.
Yeah. But there was one fella I remember walking around. He had a Che Guevara shirt and had like the hammer and sickle on it and everything like that. We sort of just look at each other and think, I think something under communist regimes responsible for something about 100 to 110 million deaths. Like whether that be, I don't know, famine, execution, labor, like all that. Yeah, we talk about
gulags.
Gulags. I mean, Stalin and Chairman Mao they carry most of the bill for that. A good probably 90% of it.
Oh yeah.
But it's like it's perfectly acceptable to sort of walk around with a hammer and sickle shirt on if you wanted.
Yeah.
Yet if and we were looking at each other thinking, why is that okay? But if someone was walking around with like a swastika on their shirt, you'd be fucking horrified, and rightly so. Don't get me wrong, but it's just is it because I guess it plays into that whole thing that we see all we see with like Stalin and Mao and all these people is they're just sort of Cold War personalities. We don't really think about the rest that happened. It's
we view them through that cult of personality kind of larger than like they're like kind of demigods in a way, aren't they? Yeah. So it's funny because when I was in Berlin last year, and when you're walking through, you go through the Cold War stuff and this, the Berlin Wall is, but like all the stuff they sell on the streets, you can buy old, Soviet Union like hats and uniforms and the old Democratic Republic Eastern Germany flag with the sickle and hammer on it and stuff. And but you couldn't find any Third Reich stuff anywhere. It's all outlawed and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Well, actually, that reminds me. When I went to Moscow, I went to Russia, 10, 12 years ago. When I was in Moscow, we were touring around, having a little tour of the city, seeing some museums, and I was underground in the railway stations because nobody sort of crosses the street; they all cross underground. It's
interesting.
It's cool. Yeah. It's actually quite logical.
Efficient.
Yeah, more efficient. Yeah. But I remember in there, there's people playing music, and there's Stalin lookalikes, and there was like a Stalin lookalike guy, like, oh, he's doing photos. I'm like, oh, can I have a photo? And I had a photo with him, and I can't remember how many rubles I gave him to take the photo. But I remember I got the photo with him, and it's just me doing a thumbs up, and it's just being a fuckwit tourist, basically.
Yeah.
And I think about it after, I'm like, fucking hell, that man, how many deaths is that man responsible for? And I'm getting a fucking photo with him, I'm like.
but the fact that someone's like cosplaying as him where it's like imagine walking down like I don't know the Hollywood Walk of Fame, they have like Batman and stuff, and someone's like just as Hitler, you're like, oh fucking hell, what the hell?
I'm like, why is that okay? It sort of reminds me, like I've shown you that scene on like Peep Show when Sophie's trying to only Peep Show fans, I don't know how many are out there, but when Mark, he's a bit of a stick in the mud and she's trying to give him a new look, it's a new girlfriend. She's trying to dress him up, and he's got a beard and stuff. She goes, "Oh, here's a nice shirt. Why don't you wear this? This will go with your new look." And he goes, "It's got like a Chairman Mao on the shirt." And he's like, "Do you know who that is?" She's like, "Oh, it's Chairman Mao, isn't it? It's one of the people you like from history." Yeah, he's responsible for 60 million deaths. It's like that's more than Stalin, isn't it? He's like, well, it's not a competition, but fuck, he'd absolutely win. It's just like, it's just normal now. Actually, I might drop that in.
Yeah.
What about this?
You do know who that is, don't you?
Yeah, it's Chairman Mao, isn't it?
Exactly. The man was responsible for the deaths of 60 million people. I don't want him on my chest.
60 million? That's more than Stalin, isn't it?
It's not a competition, Soph. Although if it was, Mao would probably win.
Oh, these are nice. Try these on.
This is just a zip. There's no pocket to this zip.
So?
That's the way things are these days. Let's just put a zip here, a swastika there. Why not? Who knows what these things were once used for? Who the hell even cares?
No, it's funny. When I was in Hong Kong, 12 years ago too, and you could easily buy Chairman Mao stuff everywhere. Same with, I guess it's kind of like that's when China started to take over Hong Kong then.
Yeah.
And as I said, you said something like Che Guevara or Fidel Castro everywhere. You see all those cult of personality types of the communist or socialist regimes everywhere. But anything you can't buy a Mussolini or Hitler shirt, could you?
No, you can't.
And rightfully so. But it's just it's interesting how that side of it you can, but the other side is like a no-go zone. So
the victor not only rewrites history, they in some ways erase it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, couldn't sum up better this whole book, could you? So Andrew, what can listeners expect on next week's episode?
So George A. Romero's seminal hit, Night of the Living Dead.
Yes, when did that come out?
1968.
Okay, I've never seen any of the Night of the Living Dead and Awakening. What was the other one?
No, Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead, sorry. Yeah,
Day of the Dead. Fucking Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, all the Deads.
I was about to say Walking Dead, but that's a different one. Yeah.
This This is one of the first attacks on consumerism. It is a bit campy by today's standards, but look, it's very low budget, but in sort of the horror genre, this is groundbreaking. And,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was like the first one that made it into the mainstream, right? The zombie genre.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
This is the one with the old-fashioned brain.
Yeah, it stops short of that, but you think it's going to go there at times. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I love that campiness to it. It's great. But yeah, I'm assuming that there must be some, because this genre is so huge now, and on face value, it's one where you think, oh, it's just mindless killing. Zombie action where you're just mowing them down, but there's actually from what you've told me, there's a lot more nuance and social commentary to it.
A hell of a lot of social commentary at the time. Height of the Cold War, and I guess still kind of that conformity state, and that fear of other. So there's a lot of good talking points in this. Yeah,
well, I'm looking forward to giving it a watch and giving our thoughts and feelings on it. So, but yeah, as always, guys, you can hit us up on our socials at Dystopedia Pod on Instagram and Tumblr. You can shoot us an email at info@dystopediapodcast.com. We're on YouTube as well at Dystopedia Podcast. So like, subscribe, comment, all those great things. And on behalf of myself and Andrew, we'll catch you next week.
See you next time.